Distinguished dignitaries among the audience, esteemed members of the Chennai Center for China Studies, the National Maritime Foundation, and the Peninsula Foundation, respected veterans of the armed forces, dignitaries from foreign missions in Chennai, friends from the media, students, ladies and gentlemen, a good day to you all. I am Ashwin Suren, and I deem it my honor and privilege to host the C3S Founders Memorial Lecture, followed by the panel discussion on the need for national security strategy, challenges, and priorities, which is jointly organized by the C3S and the NMF, which will be followed by lunch, which gives us an added reason for you to join us till the end. We are pleased to have with us today Ambassador T.S Tirumurti, a seasoned diplomat, former secretary at the Ministry of External Affairs, and India's former permanent representative to the United Nations, who will deliver the C3S's Founders Memorial Lecture, speaking on the subject of combating global terrorism, trends and challenges. This will be followed by a panel discussion on the need for national security strategy, challenges and priorities, which will be chaired by Rear Admiral S. Raman, the flag officer commanding Tamil Nadu and Puducherry Naval Area. Joining him, we have distinguished panelists Commodore R.S. Vasan, the Director General of the C3S and the Regional Director of the National Maritime Foundation, Colonel Hariharan, formerly military intelligence and a renowned analyst in specializing in South Asia. And we have with us Air Marshal M. Matheeswaran, the founder president of the Peninsula Foundation. Among the audience, we also have with us the chief patron of the C3S, B.S. Raghavan IAS retired, who would be joining us virtually, Professor V. Suryanarayan, founding director, Center for the South and Southeast Asian Studies at the University of Madras, and Shri L.V. Krishnan, former director for the Safety Research Group, Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research, Kalpakkam. At the outset, I thank all of you for joining us today. Napoleon once said, "Strategy is the art of using space and time. Space we can recover, but lost time never." Keeping his advice in mind, and without any further ado, I would love to invite the Director General of the C3S and Regional Director of the National Maritime Foundation, Commodore Vasan, to give you all a warm welcome.
Thank you very much. A very good morning to all of you. Ambassador Tirumurti, Flag Officer Tamil Nadu Area, Rear Admiral Raman, Consul General of Japan, Colonel Hariharan, Professor Suryanarayan, Mr. L.V. Krishnan, and all the other dignitaries, Ambassador Swaminathan, who's made it a point to attend, and all the students. We normally ensure that there is a substantial presence of the students because they are the ones who need to be educated and not us, because all of us are frozen in time and we won't change our ideas. So therefore I'm very happy that in each of our program we have a substantial participation from different colleges in Chennai. With all your permission, may I request you to just stand up for about a minute so that we can pray for all these founders and others who have been significant contributors to the progress of C3S. Please pray in silence for about a minute. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Now, as you know, this is the only think tank outside of Delhi that specializes in China studies. And this is also the only chapter outside of Delhi as far as the National Maritime Foundation is concerned. So it's a unique honor for me to celebrate this day today. It's a commemorative day. where we pay homage to the founders who thought it fit to start a think tank here. So it was Mr. Raman whose idea it was to start a think tank here to specialize in China. So I was way ahead of his time in all dimensions. And I must personally tell you that he was responsible for me to get into a think tank. He was part of ORF at that time, and I used to participate in a freelancing capacity, presenting papers, writing papers, etc. So he called me and ensured that I joined ORF. So it's been a journey of nearly 18 years in think tanks for me personally, and I'm indebted to Mr. Raman for grooming me to be a researcher. So there are others who have known Raman, Mr. Swaminathan, R. Swaminathan, IPS, and Mr. Rajan very well, and so we have requested them to speak for about 5 minutes or so. We did have the very first Raman Memorial lecture well before the COVID. That was really about 6-7 years ago, and that was in Madras University, and that talk was delivered by Mr. Raghavan at that time, who is a CBI director. Thereafter, somehow, because of COVID and because of the fact that we all were in the virtual platform, this did not take place. So I'm so happy that we started this again, and instead of the Raman Memorial Lecture, now it's named as the Founders Memorial Lecture, because unfortunately we also lost Swaminathan. We lost Mr. Rajan, who was the founding director, from whom I took over 8 years ago, and Mr. PNG Subramaniam was a consul general in Shanghai. Unfortunately, he also had his own health issues and he was not able to contribute much. But these were the stalwarts who are with us and who laid the foundations for a think tank well away from Chennai. So as far as Mr. Raman is concerned, of course, we have his own elder brother, Mr. B.S. Raghavan, who has recorded his own views of his brother. And Swaminathan, I can tell you very briefly about all these three gentlemen, because like I said, it was Raman who got me into the think tank. Mr. Swaminathan was so punctual, and when we were running the Center for Asia Studies, he would say, Vasan, when do you want that paper? And I would say, sir, take about 3 days. So on the dot, on the second day before the clock struck 23:59, the paper would be on my table. That's how he prompt was. So, it's been a phenomenal experience for me personally to work with these giants who've been recognized in their own respective sphere, and they've added so much more value in terms of their experience, their expertise, their rich contribution in terms of articles. I'm also very happy to tell you today that we have many interns with us, and we tasked them to dig out all the articles that have been written by these three stalwarts, Raman, Rajan, and Swaminathan. And we are now bringing out a compilation of this, because this would be lost to the people otherwise. There are more than 200 articles Mr. Raman has written. In fact, his brother would jokingly say that as the blasts are taking place in Afghanistan, with each blast he would get one paper out. So that was the speed at which he would produce. I have seen him typing it. He would type on a small laptop in one finger. That's how fast he was. It's amazing to see that he was contributing in that kind of a manner. And we were enriched by his presence, by his persona, and it was amazing. Therefore, we are very, very honored that all of you are here, and I am personally extremely grateful to Ambassador Tirumurti for accepting this invitation to deliver this Founders Memorial talk today. And he's the most qualified person, having just come out of United Nations as a permanent representative. And he's written also extensively about terrorism and how the world looks at it. And I'm sure you have read his articles in the papers. So this is the way it is. So we said, instead of just having the Founders Memorial talk, let's also make it a little more meaningful and try and get some perspectives on national security strategy. Now, this perhaps is an overflogged horse, because everybody has different definitions of national security strategy. And I must tell you that all of you are, of course, monitoring the fact that in just last 6 months or so, there are major national security strategies which have come out. One from Japan in December, again from America, the national security strategy, and UK and Australia have also come out with their own national security strategy. And when you look at this, you realize that it's not about defining how a war is to be fought. There are misconceptions about what strategy is. Military strategy is quite different. But as a national security strategy, it encompasses a lot related to food security, energy security, livelihood of people, commitment to, all these are what is encompassed. So what I found, I read through all these national security strategy documents of all these nations. And what is noteworthy is these are fundamentals that are addressed. So if America is talking about national security strategy in about 48 pages, UK talks about it in 68 pages, and Japan talks about it in about 38 or 40 pages. What they try to focus is that, there are certain core values. And our strategy is all about ensuring that these core values are promoted and not compromised. So I think we should be very clear when we are debating national security strategy. But when you look at some of the debates in the paper or in the media, you wonder what is national security strategy at all. So the very definitions are skewed by the commentators. And even in our dialogues and discourse, you think that, talking about Army, Navy, Air Force is national security strategy. It's not. These are means to an end. So unfortunately, we mistake the woods for the trees or the trees for the woods or whatever, and therefore there is. So we thought that perhaps we're not going to discuss national security strategy. Like I said, if you are looking at a document which talks about, as a democracy, I am committed to democratic values, secular credentials. And in terms of American document which has come out, they're talking definitely about China and Russia. They open about it and say that these we see as challenges. And therefore, there is a certain amount of strategy that's required at the technological level, at the military level, at the political level, at the diplomatic level. So, I thought I'll make this very clear so that there are no misconceptions about what national security strategy is all about. So, but what we are going to discuss today is, as far as the three veterans are concerned, Colonel Hariharan, Air Marshal Matheshwar and self are concerned, we are trying to look at it purely from a military point of view to see what these military strategies are and what are the driving forces that are there as far as our military strategy is concerned. So I thought I will make this very clear as to what is it that we are looking at. And the first part we are going to look at the challenges to terrorism and the global responses, which Ambassador Tirumurti will cover, and thereafter we will be having this. Please do have all your questions ready, and it's very rare that you'll get an opportunity like this to question a person who has recently come out of United Nations. So he's agreed to take on questions after his talk. And also we have Professor Suryanarayan, Colonel Hariharan, and Mr. L.V. Krishnan, who have known the founders very well. Rajan I have personally known very well for one simple reason, that the Center for Asia Studies was the place where Chennai Center for China Studies was incubated. We gave them space. In fact, Mr. Raman and Rajan used to come and sit there. And Ashik and self were the ones who designed this. I was only a guest member at that time. I was not a permanent member of this. So we were the ones who gave them the place. And finally, when Center for Asia Studies moved out of the Eldams Road complex, we handed over the entire building to them. And that is where Raman and Rajan used to work. And I must tell you how committed Mr. Rajan was, that he was all alone. And his wife would come with his food to Eldams Road and give him food. And, he used to work with just one intern who was there. And we would, of course, help him as and when required. And he looked up to this. So, there have been these excellent examples of how they were so committed in running this think tank, which is now come of age. In the last 8 years, we've been ranked in the first 30, 40 think tanks. In some other cases, we are within the first 10. It has not come easy. It's come because of a lot of hard work of all the members, the interns, the research teams that we have, which is young and dynamic. So this is a good occasion to remember what contributions have been made by our founders, and then also to look beyond the normal definitions of national security strategy. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir, for your warm words of welcome. As a part of today's program, we are honored to remember the founders of the Chennai Center for China Studies who are no longer among us. To share a few words of remembrance, it is my honor to invite Shri B.S. Raghavan, who will be joining us virtually, to share a few words of his remembrance.
It is our great good fortune that on the Founders' Day to give the memorial lecture, we have a very distinguished ambassador, retired as permanent representative to the United Nations, T.S. Tirumurti. His services as the permanent representative to the United Nations will be remembered for a long time. He is going to talk on global terrorism, trends and challenges, and I can think of no person fit enough to do that. I am very happy that the Chennai Center has been able to get him to give the lecture. The Founders' Day, on this Founders' Day, we have to recall with the utmost gratitude the contribution made by the Ministry of External Affairs in enabling the center to carry on its activities by yearly grants, and they have been quite helpful to us in guiding us to carry on the activities of the center in tune with the national requirement. The Founders' Day Memorial Lecture organized by the Chennai Center for China Studies is truly a landmark event because it was the founders who gave the mission and the theme, and it is because of them that our center has made such a progress and has occupied enviable ranks already in the world ranking system. I am therefore very happy that they have called high-profile people from the Army, Navy, and the Air Force to come and participate in this event. The substance of the talks on the very important subjects that this theme, this day is going to discuss should be widely circulated, and particularly, if necessary, it should be personally taken to the powers that be, to the decision makers in Delhi. One of the founders is B. Raman. I am his elder brother. It is very, very difficult for a brother to talk about his brother, even though when he passed away, I wrote an article called The Brother's Tribute to a Brother. I will send it later on to the Chennai Center, and if they think fit, they can circulate it to the participants. A brother's tribute to a brother. Though I myself say it as a brother, B. Raman was an extraordinary person, the like of whom is difficult to come across either in India or abroad. His perception of the nuances of the events that were taking place was something of unparalleled depth and insight. And his blogs, which he almost wrote twice or thrice a day, were widely read not merely by in India, but in places like the US State Department and in Brookings Institution and other major think tanks all over the world. Not many may know that he was the only non-Chinese member of the Olympics Security Committee that was organized by the Republic of China. He was called, all others were members from PRC. Raman was the only non-Chinese member of that committee. He was invited to appear before the US Congress to give evidence on 6 occasions, and he spoke boldly. Raman's, one of the characteristics was his utter boldness and frankness and straightforward interpretation of events, so that people were left in no doubt about what the significance of those events was. So I'm immensely proud as a brother. I'm immensely proud as someone who had known a great personality, that he was one of the founders and he was going to be a great influence on the Chennai Center for China Studies. I wish the center all success. I want the Memorial Day lecture to make a difference to the thinking of this country on these events. Particularly, my great interest lies in the formulation of a national doctrine of security, national security doctrine. We have been very lax in not having one. And in that doctrine, I hope they will take an overall comprehensive view of security, not merely political or otherwise, but that will encompass economic, social, political, and other dimensions of national life. Because nowadays, everything is intertwined with every other thing. Therefore, I convey my very best wishes to the organizers of this function, especially to the Director General, Commodore R.S. Vasan. General Shankar is going to be there, Bhattishwaran is going to be there, and I am very happy that Rear Admiral S. Venkatraman, the flag officer commanding, is going to be the sessions chair. It's a great event, but for my health and but for my age and age-related disabilities, it should have given me immense pleasure to be physically present, not merely physically present, but since I had myself a little bit of modicum of experience in handling security for about 15 years, it would have given me great pleasure in contributing to the lecture that is being organized today.
We are extremely grateful to Shri B.S. Raghavan for having taken the efforts to send us a video commemorating Mr. B. Raman. Now we have another eminent member of the C3S, Professor V. Suryanarayan, the founding director for the Center for South and Southeast Asian Studies at the University of Madras, to share his words of remembrance. I welcome you, sir.
I associate myself with our patron B.S. Raghavan and my boss Commodore Vasan in paying my homage and tribute to the memory of B. Raman and others who are associated with us, K. Swaminathan, D.S. Rajan, and Dr. Chandrasekharan. I never knew them while they were in service, though many of them have read my articles in the Hindu, the Frontline, and various other magazines. When Raman made Chennai his home and came here, he made it a point to come to the university and see me and introduce himself. And that was love at first sight. I didn't know much about the RAW. I was thinking that an espionage organization behaving in a cloak and dagger policy, but Raman changed my perception of RAW. He was willing to talk to my students, and they also introduced him to the universities, communities in South India. And he in turn put me in touch with several organizations. Those days in the University of Madras, we used to have regular seminars where not only the academicians participated, but also eminent journalists like M. Ram, former diplomats like Thomas Abraham and K.P.S. Menon Jr., intelligence specialists like Colonel Hariharan, Jose Tarail, Radha Vinod Raju and all. And for my students, it was an intellectual treat to bring together all these people in one platform. Unfortunately, those days are no longer existing in Madras University. For a university, it should be the center of academic excellence and intellectual exchange of various points of view. Nowadays, the vice chancellors do not believe in those things. I was perhaps closer to Swaminathan than Mr. Raman, and we brought together two policy briefs, one on Tamil Nadu coastal security and the Sri Lanka factor, and the second one, contested territory or common heritage, thinking out of the box. Nobody takes me seriously, neither my student nor my wife or daughter, but when I wrote this with Swaminathan, they took it very seriously, and thanks to Swaminathan, it was distributed widely in the national capital, in the MEA, in the intelligence organization. And they used to get phone calls from Delhi seeking clarification. We were working on an equally interesting project on federal units and the making a neighborhood policy. In fact, Swaminathan was collecting a lot of materials. I had also done my limited work. Then the cruel hands of fate snatched him away. What endeared all these people to me was the fact they were forthright in expressing their views. And not merely that, they were willing to share information with an academic like me. Both Raman and Swaminathan, they told me repeatedly, and I also mentioned it in my article, they were opposed to Ramesh Bhandari's policy of dragging the Tamil militants into the negotiating table in Thimpu. They said it will be a great blunder and we should continue the earlier policy of Indira Gandhi and G. Parthasarathi, with the TULF, which was elected by the people in the 1977 election, should be the chief negotiator. But somehow Ramesh Bhandari insisted. And they said, we have made our point clear to you, now we will obey your orders.
And it was Swaminathan who told Balasingham that if you don't go to Thimphu, then India will stop all aid to you. And Thimphu, as you all know, ended in a disaster. And Ramesh Bhandari started this policy of leading Sri Lanka into a quagmire. In 1999, when Murali Manohar Joshi was the education minister and the Indian Council for Social Science Research was under my professor, Professor M.L. Sondi, they wanted to organize the first international seminar on terrorism and political violence. Sondi got in touch with me, and through my good officers, Raman was also there, and the keynote address was delivered by R.N. Kaur. But the most scintillating and most brilliant speech was made by Raman, who captured the hearts and minds of the audience. He spoke on political violence and terrorism in Pakistan. The book is published, Terrorism and Political Violence, a source book. And I think it must be made compulsory reading for all students. In fact, the idea of starting the Chennai Center for China Studies originated in a meeting that Rajan, Raman and myself had in my residence over sundowners in the evening. And Raman all of a sudden told Rajan and me that we should have a think tank away from Delhi, because the lure of the capital and lure of the establishment is very, very powerful even among the academics. I know my friends in the JNU who become more royal than the king and more Anglican than the bishop so that they can get an ambassadorship. Now Chennai is far away, and Raman felt rightly that we should provide benign inputs into the making of India's neighborhood policy, especially on China. Then came a surprising suggestion. He said, if I and Rajan started it, it will be dubbed as a raw outfit. So Suryanarayan, you become the first chairman of the think tank. I can't say no to him, but I told him that I have not done any work on China. Most of my work had been on South Asia and Southeast Asia, though I had done a lot of work on overseas Chinese and their role in various other countries. No, you be the chairman, so it will not be it will not be perceived as a raw outfit. So what happened was that I was seen by many people as a man representing the raw outfit. Anyway, we had done tremendous work, and I'm happy that it is today rated as one of the best think tanks in the world. I'm very happy that Commodore Vasan had said that we'll be publishing shortly all that Raman has written in South Asia Analysis Group, and it should also be translated into Tamil. I also wish that we compile. Colonel Hariharan has written a lot, I have written a lot on that in South Asia Analysis. On subject-wise, we can divide them, and if possible, we should also revive the South Asia Analysis Group. That will be a most fitting tribute to the memory of the founding fathers. What else should I say? Vasan has started looking at the watch. Thank you. Science of advancing age.
Please support it.
Thank you, Professor Suryanarayan, for your very engaging speech. I would now love to invite Colonel R. Hariharan former military intelligence, and a specialist on South Asia, to share his words. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, gentlemen, distinguished speakers, and the young audience. Normally, I don't have a script to talk about on my presentations. It is mainly a mental exercise supported by PowerPoint. But today, I have prepared a script. Of course, I am older than the oldest here. That is one reason. But more than that, I want to highlight specific qualities of Swaminathan. Swaminathan was much senior to me in service. I joined when the Chinese were at the gates in 1962. Swaminathan joined the IPS cadre much earlier, Andhra cadre. And if you read I think Raman's book on the cowboys, the history of Raw, you will get a reference to Mr. Swaminathan. Mr. Swaminathan had very wide experience. I participated in 1965 war as an artillery officer and 71 as an intelligence guy. So at the time in 65, the entire intelligence structure of the country was being reformed, including the military intelligence. So I have seen the RNAW from the inception. Myself, Professor Swaminathan, Mr. Swaminathan, Raman, and Rajan, we used to swap stories because we had a lot of, at the time the intelligence community was very small. We knew each other in IB, MI. MI was only 60 officers. So it was a very intimate, common friends. So my relationship is totally different with Mr. Swaminathan, whom I met only when I joined. I was one of the earliest to join when Raman invited me to join. Actually, he wanted me to join ORF. I refused because, as I've been mentioning, I had years of working. So I wanted to have beer in the afternoon, listen to music and these pastimes which you never have in army service. But of course, we also shared some sundowners, as Professor Suryanarayan mentioned. So it was a very enriching experience to me. I am going off the script, my script, to say the two things about which were common which was distinctly common between Swaminathan and myself. One was he had headed the Aviation Research Center. There is a 33 mobile, neither it was mobile, so naturally it was called the Mobile Depot in Dumduma. So I was an imagery guy, basically, when imagery was in its infancy. Now, of course, it's a separate discipline. So I started my intelligence career on imagery assessments. In 71 war, I took a lot of, among other things, I did this imagery assessments. So we had a lot of common interest on the technical aspects of intelligence collection. Of course, we have had exposure on other human intelligence and also the so-called 007 activities. I have never come across a pretty girl or a blonde. All thugs, traffickers, drug traffickers, guns, gun makers, illegal gun makers, and this only. So that is aside. So with each one, it was a different plane, these founder members. And with Chennai Center for China Studies should have a representative always from the intelligence community. Because we are, while in service, we are afraid to discuss. My boss won't even see the accounts. After 71 war, our accounts were audited. Government of India wanted all intelligence accounts to be audited, otherwise we are not audited. I had prepared, my boss refused to see. My general said, it is your headache. And there was luckily a South Indian auditor who looked at my accounts and said, why did you maintain it? You are not supposed to maintain it. I said, I know somebody like Raman will come and look at my accounts. I said, I want to have a good night's sleep. My point is, there is lack of accountability of intelligence agencies. Both of us, Swaminathan and myself, we shared very strong views on this. Both of us had taken up, when I was assisting as executive assistant to the DGMI, I had taken up with the DGMI at that time accountability of military intelligence. Many of us had put up that we should have an inspectorate like infantry or others so that we will validate our performance. He also felt Swaminathan was very strong, had very strong views. So, similarly, he had another interest, common interest was the Mizo insurgency. He was one of the chief negotiators who had dealt with Lal Denga for a long time. I also had dealt with Mizo insurgency. I had also met, of course, not Lal Denga was sitting in Karachi, whereas the minions were operating in Bangladesh and in East Pakistan and Mizoram itself. So I had a lot of involvement with the Mizo insurgency. So we had, I remember I quoted him. Once Lal Denga, his deputy Lalming Tanga told me that Lal Denga said the Mizo insurgency continues. MNF continues because some guys in Home Ministry want to stay in Delhi. I quoted this to him. Swaminathan, that idiot, he wanted to live in Karachi in comfort, so it is prolonged. Things like this, we had swapped stories. Another aspect was, I was a visiting faculty in the IIM Indore and Raipur on communication and assessments. So the director wanted me to address a BSF officer special course run by IIM. And I told him, I have strong views about BSF. I wouldn't want to handle them. He says, no, you can be frank. I said, why don't you invite Mr. Swaminathan? So he was invited. And he is a very senior officer, police officer, and special secretary who had excellent knowledge. We were to discuss border management, the issues faced. I have had exposure in the border management issues. I have attended meetings also with the Burmese, Bangladesh and Pakistan. So that was not a big problem for me, but I am giving my perspective. BSF has its own woes, its own problems. So both of us spoke for about an hour, and then the BSF opened the broadside, not on the issues we raised, but on the pay commission which has discriminated them as against the regular police cadre. I was amazed the way Swaminathan handled. Of course, I was clueless because we had our own cribs about our pay commission. Army comes in a separate, army is a separate caste, untouchables. So the way he handled, I was amazed. No wonder he put Laldenga in a spin. He could negotiate his way through and make them all agree what was done was correct and what they should do rather than arguing about it. He showed them the way. So this is the other facet of his. These are the hidden facets. Unfortunately, he has not recorded, unlike Raman. He was shy of recording it. Being a true intelligence guy, we don't maintain diaries because, not because of security, because of our vulnerability. So he had this fund of knowledge, which the book that he was referring on Tamil Nadu coastal area security, which Professor Suryanarayan wrote it along with Swaminathan. The Sri Lanka was trying to promote a track 2 discussion and the first tenure of President Rajapaksa. So they had done the first phase of operation of capture of the regaining control of the eastern province, that is Batikalo. In 2006, when it was over, I was invited along with 2 others by President Rajapaksa. So I discussed the military aspects, what all have gone wrong, because he asked me, and how to resolve the issue, because he wanted to keep India on the good side when he goes for major kill against the northern province. So we suggested to him that he should resolve this fishermen's issue, which is a bug. So we used that small booklet Professor Suryanarayan and Swaminathan had written. It had very positive suggestions. And over lunch, the President discussed this aspect. And Mr. Devasaheb was also a member. He had contacts in ADB who would finance, because it suggests developing the local resources, taking the fisheries community to make it a productive contribution to society, taking them away from fishing, unless that is done, because it's fished out, the whole area. So this, of course, it petered out. They had again second meeting. I didn't attend that because war was galloping, and Rajapaksa didn't stick to his promises. So I didn't want to get involved in this so-called track 2 or whatever it is. So the suggestion pettered out. So he could do this kind of original thing. I want to put 2 slides of his, will you please put, of his. One on first slide, please. No. There's a PPT slide. I had sent Sapna. His statements, I want to draw attention. It is on my phone, you can take it. If it's not possible, don't worry. I can read it out. But they're already, backbenchers are going to sleep. My voice may put them to, lull them to. This is on India-China border issue. This border dispute, how to resolve it. This was our patron also has got this pet views. It is not that I totally agree with him, but I appreciate his ability to put across this. I fully agree with him. This issue will never be solved because the 2 countries have their own perceptions and their own way of looking at it. So he says separate the administrative boundary. This is the line of factual control as it is seen. But line of factual control itself, both the countries don't see it together. So I will not go into it because it's a totally different topic. But what I say is he had always, this was his negotiating strategy. You know, in the book Getting to Yes, how the negotiating strategy is discussed. If you get to the book, you read it. It's a very interesting book, Getting to Yes. So he had this ability that how Tawang is a contentious issue. The Chinese will never agree to Tawang, sacrificing Tawang because of historical reasons. So he had addressed that also issue. Next one, please. This is about the legislative oversight. I had written a note about this. In MI Directorate, I was ticked off for this. Don't poach into our domain. You do what you tell, what you are told. I very strongly feel these are what you call, in Hindi only I can say, what you call sarkari sand. You know, the bulls, temple bulls, which are roaming around because the lack of, I can tell you, there is all over the world, intelligence agencies have been brought to some legislative oversight. I feel You may say there might be members from this, that, and whatnot. Doesn't matter. I have strong views on the Official Secrets Act also. We will do it on another occasion. Thank you all. I will always cherish the memory of Swaminathan because he had a macro look on things, whereas we were doing this micro nitpicking. He looked at issues from the macro level. Thank you all.
Thank you, Colonel, for your words of remembrance. I would now like to invite Shri L.V. Krishnan, the former Director for Safety Research Group at the Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research, Kalpakkam, to share his words on Shri D.S. Rajan.
Thank you, Commodore, for this opportunity to speak about Rajan. Rajan stands out in this group because he's the true student of China because of his language ability. I'm actually an odd man in this crowd because I can't speak about national security and things like that, but what drew me into this is because of my interest in China from my college days, and also when I joined the Department of Atomic Energy, I went to a school in Oak Ridge where there were some Chinese colleagues as well. And I was also interested in the Chinese language, and that's how I got into this. I did not have as close a association with either Raman or Swaminathan or Rajan. But I used to write about China and China's nuclear power program in South Asia Analysis Group and also later in C3S, and that's what brought me into this. China scholars come in three flavors. One is, of course, those who are from the foreign service. The next is the academia. And Rajan belonged to the third, which was the military and intel group. When he entered service, I think the country had just then gone through this trauma of China attacking their borders, and there were not too many people with Chinese language ability. So Rajan was tasked to learn Chinese. He had his initial exposure to the Chinese language from the School of Languages, the Ministry of Defense, not the Foreign Service or the academia, right? And he did very well there, so he was sent to Hong Kong for higher acquaintance with the language, and he did very well. And he also decided to go and learn Japanese in Tokyo. I think that was very important because Japan is one country which has long and deep understanding of China, right? And I think that is what has helped him very much in this. Now, when he retired and settled down in Chennai, it was his luck that Raman and Swaminathan were also there, and Raman's suggestion was quickly taken up by Rajan. Even before he came here, I think he was in ORF, and he used to write about China, right? Now, Rajan has actually written not just about China's, military power and things like that. As a true intel man, he was looking at various other aspects of China. In fact, if you look at what reports that he has written, you will find that they include things like tradition and its influence on the thinking of present leaders. And I think that actually is what we see today in terms of what Xi Jinping says. And he also talked about civilization contacts between India and China in the past and their meaning in the bilateral contacts now. Then about governance in China. I think he has said quite a bit about governance in China and how Xi Jinping was trying to change that. Then about modernizing of forces by China and its implications. China's selective approach to multilateralism. China-Taiwan Summit of 2015. Fostering synergistic relations between India and Japan. Now, after all this, his conclusion is that China and India can be neither rivals nor partners. I think that's going to be the conclusion of most of us in this anyway, and that's how we must try to, solve this riddle about our relations with China. Now, a compilation of China's Rajan's papers, I was trying to build up my own catalog, and I'm happy that C3S is doing it now. Otherwise, I think they were scattered. And I think it would be a good advice to all our interns and new members to go through this carefully, because I find that as I read through Rajan's papers, it provides me a lot of understanding about what is happening today. And I'm happy that C3S has taken up this task. I wish them well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir, for your words of remembrance. I would like to inform the audience that the articles that were referred to by Shri B.S. Raghavan have been provided to you in your folder. Please do take a look at them when you have the time. Having remembered our revered late members who have left a considerable legacy for us to carry forward, we now turn to today's memorial lecture. Our next speaker is an illustrious man who needs no introduction, yet I'm much obliged to introduce him. Ambassador T.S. Tirumurti was an Indian diplomat with a career spanning 37 years in the service. Having joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1985, he has represented India's interests in various capacities before retiring in June 2022. He served as India's permanent representative to the United Nations in New York between 2020 and 2022. Ambassador Tirumurti had previously served in the Indian Embassy in Cairo, Egypt, where he had gotten his diploma in the Arabic language. He was the first secretary at the Permanent Mission of India to the United Nations in Geneva, Switzerland, and he was also the first Indian representative to the Palestinian Authority in Gaza. Later, he had served as consular at the Indian Embassy in Washington, D.C., United States, and Deputy Chief of Mission in Jakarta, Indonesia. He was India's High Commissioner to Malaysia in Kuala Lumpur between 2013 and 2018. Ambassador Tirumurti served as Undersecretary Bhutan, Director of the Foreign Secretary's Office, Joint Secretary Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Maldives, and Joint Secretary United Nations Economic and Social Council. During his stints at the Ministry of External Affairs, he has also been India's negotiator in climate change and environmental related issues. This is just an outline of his illustrious career, a man of great experience, and it is my most extraordinary privilege to invite the ambassador to present the C3S Founders Memorial Lecture. I hand over the rostrum to you, sir.
Shri B.S. Raghavan, Director General Commodore R.S. Vasan, Admiral S. Venkatraman, His Excellency the Consul General of Japan, Ambassador Taga, representatives from colleges and universities, and distinguished friends. It's indeed a great privilege to be asked to give the Founders' Day Memorial Lecture on combating global terrorism, trends and challenges. I thank Commodore R.S. Vasan for his invitation and for giving me an opportunity to share my thoughts on this very important topic. Let me felicitate you, Commodore Vasan, on the range of activities that C3S has been organizing. The founders of C3S have indeed contributed in no small measure to highlight the menace of terrorism and strive to enhance and protect our national security. What we are trying to do here is to build on this legacy, the legacy that they have left behind for us. Build on their thoughts and ideas and their strong national interest. They have put together the backbone of our national security architecture. So let me at the outset pay my respectful homage to all of them. Commodore Vasan and C3S have done much to preserve this legacy of the founders, and my appreciation to him and his team. When India entered the Security Council in January 2021 for a 2-year term, one of the priority areas we had identified was combating terrorism. Given our own experience with combating terrorism, especially cross-border terrorism, we felt that we could contribute to greater understanding of the phenomena and to a more robust UN and international response to combating terrorism. Consequently, we also wanted to chair the Security Council Counter-Terrorism Committee. Since the chair of the CTC was to fall vacant only in 2022, we did some very hard bargaining to get elected as chair of the CTC. As you're aware, I was ambassador and PR to the United Nations for 18 out of the 24 months we were in the Security Council. While I have no doubt that we contributed to enhancing the focus on terrorism, both in the UN and outside, in the 2 years that we were in the Council, it is important to understand the contemporary context to appreciate how India kept the course on this matter in the UN. Friends, 11 September 2001 was a defining moment in the fight against terrorism. Before 9/11, the world was divided into your terrorists and my terrorists, since terrorism didn't quite shake up the West like it did to many others like India. But 9/11 proved that terrorism in one part of the world could devastate the center of Manhattan in New York. When this shook the world, suddenly it became a collective fight. They became our terrorists. It became a collective fight at the global level. The UN Security Council passed a binding resolution number 1373 on 28 September 2001 and also established the Security Council Counter-Terrorism Committee, whose chair for 2022 was India. In the last 20 years or more, apart from Resolution 1373, there have been significant strides taken to bring this collective focus to tackle many aspects of terrorism, especially financing of terrorism, nexus with other transnational crimes, Islamic jihadist terror, etc. While we are also in an era where contemporary and emerging technologies are being weaponized by terror groups and individuals. Each of these sources are coming under the scanner. However, while there is definitely a more concerted effort at a broader level, there is a more disconcerting scenario which is unfolding. After more than 20 years of 9/11 uniting us to fight the common menace of terror, we are in the danger of drifting back to the era of your terrorists and my terrorists. We have just entered the era where, after pronouncing that there can be no excuse or justification for terror, there are moves to categorize terrorism based on motivation for such acts. For example, talking about Europe, the preoccupation of Europe has turned to the rise of their right wing. They have identified right wing violent attacks as their main terror threats. They are being called variously like right wing violent extremism, or violent nationalism, or far right terrorism, or more simply, right wing terrorism. Interestingly, the rise of their right wing has made Europe defensive while accosting other forms of terrorism across the world, including especially the radical Islamist jihadi terror upsurge in their own countries. Consequently, they are increasingly unable or unwilling to fully support counter-terrorism efforts elsewhere, whether in Asia or in Africa. As far as the United States is concerned, their priority domestically changed, and they are dealing with what they call racially, ethnically motivated violent extremism, REMV, and related terror attacks. They have called it this, not me. This domestic brand of extremist terror has been their main focus. While the United States has continued to attack select high-value terror targets and closely cooperate with India to bring terrorists under the ambit of the 1267 sanctions regime of the UN Security Council, after what happened in Afghanistan and their ambivalence in calling Taliban for full implementation of the benchmarks which has been set out by the UN Security Council Resolution 2593, especially on terror, and the mixed signals of the United States against state-sponsored cross-border terror from Pakistan, the US may well step back from a more robust strategy to tackle terror in Asia and Africa. China has claimed that it has its own terror-related issues to tackle, which has made them compromise on a broader global strategy in order to secure their interests. Once again, their moves to legitimize the Taliban rule in Afghanistan without the Taliban meeting any of the UN Security Council resolution benchmarks, 2593 benchmarks, can be seen in this context. Their blocking of our attempt to list terrorists under the UN Security Council 1267 sanctions list is yet another example. So when we look at these developments, it seems that the West and other countries are getting preoccupied with terrorist threats which are at best limited to certain national or regional contexts and certainly not global. Though they are important in their domestic context, no doubt, their narrow focus on terror by the West and others has diluted their larger global focus. We are now slipping back to the my terrorist, your terrorist era. Another and probably larger danger in these labels being given is that they completely ignore that in democracies, right-wing or left-wing is part of the polity because they come to power through the ballot. To demonize these ideologies rather than the violent acts by such arbitrary labels may militate against democracy itself. This is a serious matter which is, however, not within the scope of my current speech. Consequently, India's endeavor has been to keep the focus on a collective fight against terror, irrespective of regional and local variations and motivations. Friends, during both our presidencies in August 2021 and December 2022, we held high-level meetings on terrorism chaired by our External Affairs Minister. Speaking on this occasion, our External Affairs Minister recalled his statement to the Council in January 2021 and his 8-point action plan he had proposed on counter-terrorism. This 8-point action plan includes, number 1, summon the political will. Don't justify terrorism, don't glorify terrorists. 2, no double standards. Terrorists are terrorists. Distinctions are made only at our own peril. Number 3, don't place blocks and holds on listing requests without any reason. Number 4, discourage exclusivist thinking and be on guard against new terminologies and false priorities. Number 5, enlist and delist objectively, not on political or religious considerations. Number 6, recognize the linkage to organized crime. Number 7, support and strengthen FATF. And number 8, providing greater funding to the UN Office of Counter-Terrorism. So we made sure that right through the 2 years we were in the council, every issue on the agenda of the council also addressed the issue of terrorism. As chair of the UN Security Council Counter-Terrorism Committee, we kept the spotlight on increase in terrorist activities in specific regions, especially in Asia and Africa, and the use of new and emerging technologies for terrorist purposes. In fact, we ensured that a separate meeting on recent developments on terrorism in Africa was held to put the spotlight on the huge spurt in Islamic jihadist terrorism in that continent. It was rather surprising when on one occasion when I was chairing the Counterterrorism Committee, some members objected to the use of zero tolerance to combat terrorism in the chair's draft statement. This phrase is used in numerous texts, including in the UN. They wanted deletion of this phrase since they said it undercut human rights, including that of the terrorists. I had to point out to them that terrorism was in fact the biggest violator of human rights. So at the very best, or at the very least rather, it is important to ensure that our fight against terrorism is not diluted in any manner. In a unique initiative, we brought the CTC meeting to India in October 2022 at a time when India was celebrating the 75th anniversary of our independence. The focus of this special CTC meeting was on the use of new and emerging technologies by terrorist groups and the gravity of the threats posed by them. The meeting was attended by more than 400 representatives from 54 member states, 33 international and regional organizations, and many others. The highlight was also a visit of the CTC to Mumbai to pay homage to the victims of the 26/11 terrorist attack in Mumbai at a solemn wreath-laying ceremony at the site of the attacks. The landmark Delhi Declaration on countering the use of new and emerging technologies for terrorist purposes was adopted during this special CTC meeting. And it focused on 3 key areas, namely 1, countering terrorist exploitation of information and communication technologies. Number 2, threats posed by terrorist use of unmanned aerial systems. And 3, countering financing of terrorism as it relates to threats associated with new payment technologies and fundraising methods. Proliferation in online activities, especially during the pandemic, has given terrorists the opportunity to target youth, including through gaming platforms for recruitment and radicalization. Social media has been used to create an online echo chamber of hate. Sophisticated communication methods like online gaming, chat rooms, and restricted access sites have sprung up. Modern fundraising and payment technologies and new payment methods are being misused freely. Commercially available unmanned aerial systems, UAS, are used by Al-Qaeda, ISIL, and of course by our own neighbor Pakistan for terror attacks and arms trafficking. Potential misuse of AI, synthetic biology, and 3D printing remains high. In other words, we have entered a far more sophisticated and dangerous era of terrorism. Apart from initiatives undertaken by governments to counter these sophisticated terrorist methods, other significant initiatives include Global Internet Forum to Counter Terrorism, GIFCT, Global Counterterrorism Forum, Tech Against Terrorism, etc. For example, GIFCT is the creation of global tech giants like Facebook, Microsoft, Twitter, YouTube, etc. in collaboration with governments, industry, civil society, etc. Larger platforms and to a certain extent smaller platforms, they are actively removing terrorist content, mostly through AI and algorithm-based machine learning. And therefore, we just need to be conscious that for every technological opportunity, there is an even greater terrorist challenge. India also proposed several names of terrorists for listing under the UN Security Council Resolution 1267 relating to sanctions. In a significant development, the United States joined us as co-signatories for these proposals. However, our attempts to list these terrorists was thwarted, and a block was placed against listing them. But in a significant development, 2 weeks after we left the Security Council, one of our proposals for terrorist listing under 1267 was actually approved by the Security Council. This was the listing of Abdul Rahman Makki, Deputy Amir and Chief of Lashkar-e-Taiba, first listing with India as a proposer in the Council and co-signed by the United States. So this was also the first terrorist to be expressly named for terrorist acts in Jammu and Kashmir. And this is indeed a very big success for our diplomacy. Friends, this brings me to another parallel development in the UN and outside. This is the worrying attempt to politicize the phobias against non-Abrahamic religions and justify terror, as well as undertake terrorist acts due to hate against another religion. This has serious implications for multicultural, pluralistic and democratic countries like ours. I think we all know that the UN has traditionally mirrored Christian values, and it is no secret. In fact, numerous such sculptures and symbols dot the UN, including the huge mural in the Security Council chamber, which combines elements from different Christian sources, including from the Greek Orthodox Church. A rare exception, in fact, is the 11th century idol of Lord Surya, the sun god, which has been gifted by India in 1982 to the United Nations. Be that as it may, the United Nations and the rest of the world have traditionally condemned phobias against the three Abrahamic religions, namely anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and Christianophobia. And rightly so. Let there be no doubt about this, that religious hate should be condemned wherever they are. Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, and Christianophobia also got exclusive references in the UN resolutions, and a gradual consolidation of this Abrahamic religious grouping has taken place. And then on the 15th of March last year, 2022, taking advantage of the fact that the West were preoccupied with their own forms of terror to deal with, as I mentioned, and given their decreasing global focus, the Organization of Islamic Countries tabled a resolution in the UN General Assembly to declare 15th March as the International Day to combat Islamophobia. The resolution was co-sponsored inter alia by China and Russia. The resolution, in effect, singled out one religiophobia above all the rest, even if many of their own OIC countries were not convinced that this was the right thing to do. These countries even rejected India's suggestion to include the word pluralism in the text. The West was missing in action, and only India and France made explanation of vote. For the first time, combating hatred against one specific religion was elevated to an international day. And what is the implication of this? Firstly, we have recently seen some fundamental assumptions on which counter-terrorism measures rest being questioned. One of the things our permanent mission also actively participated during my stint as ambassador is the adoption of the fourth UN Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy in June 2021. This was in the UN General Assembly and not in the Security Council. During the negotiations, there was consistent attempts to dilute the references to terror as well as provide justification for terror. As you're aware, the UN Global Counterterrorism Strategy adopted earlier states categorically that any acts of terrorism are criminal and unjustifiable, regardless of their motivation, wherever, whenever, and whomsoever committed. In fact, Para 3 of the UN Security Council Resolution 1566, adopted in 2004, says that terrorism is under no circumstances justifiable by considerations of a religious nature. In effect, it says that there cannot be any justification for terror. But when 3 terrorist attacks took place in France in 2020, the spokesperson of the High Representative of the UN Alliance of Civilization, UNAOC, said on 28th October 2020 that, and I quote, "The inflammatory caricatures have also provoked acts of violence against innocent civilians," unquote. So in one swift sentence, this UN body justified these terrorist attacks by providing it with a justification. And this justification was that of Islamophobia. It is not a secret that UNAOC depends on funding of Islamic countries for its survival. Fortunately, India held its ground. And in the GCTS report of June 2021, it held its ground against attempts by countries to provide justification for terror and dilute this fight against terrorism. Secondly, we are aware that all terrorist concepts say that terror cannot be attributed to any religion. Consequently, when such religiophobic attacks occur, they are conveniently labeled as terrorist attacks. But on the other hand, religion is used when we need a justification for a terror attack in many cases. We have been seeing this happen in recent past. For example, you would have all seen how analysts dubbed the attack on Salman Rushdie either as a terror attack or as an attack on freedom of speech. But no one called it a religiophobic attack, even though the author was attacked for his views on Islam and for that only. So if you do not recognize that these types of attacks are religiophobic attacks and not mere terror attacks as we understand it, one is going to further dilute the global fight against terror. Thirdly, even proposals for proscribing terrorists under Security Council Resolution 1267, they are given a religious color. Pakistan desperately tried and repeatedly to have Hindus listed under 1267 regime on cooked up charges, which was repeatedly rejected by the council. In fact, they put up the names of the same persons again under 1267 merely because they were Hindus. This is targeted hatred against one religion and nothing less. And as our External Affairs Minister said in his 8 points, enlist and delist objectively, not on political or religious considerations. Friends, 15th March resolution, which I just mentioned to you on the International Day, actually reflects an even deeper malice, which should be even more worrying, the gradual division of the UN on religious lines, Abrahamic and non-Abrahamic. This is gradually getting mirrored outside the UN as well. While it feigns to acknowledge is that in the last more than a decade, the attacks and hatred against non-Abrahamic religions have increased exponentially, in many cases emasculating minority voices. We are now in an era witnessing unacknowledged but unprecedented contemporary forms of religiophobia, including anti-Hindu, anti-Buddhist, and anti-Sikh phobias. In our own neighborhood and elsewhere, we have seen the destruction of temples, the glorification of breaking of idols, violation of Gurudwara premises, massacre of Sikh pilgrims in Gurudwaras, and destruction of the Bamiyan Buddha and other religious iconic sites. In Pakistan, attack against Hindu temples and their desecration and forcible conversion of Hindus and other minority communities have become commonplace. Hate crimes against Sikhs have also increased, including in the West, in the United States, which the External Affairs Minister himself pointed out, and elsewhere. And you have seen several recent news items of hatred in this matter. We have even seen Khalistani separatists who are Sikhs attacking Hindu temples. You have been reading it in the papers. Temples are being attacked in Canada, and Canadian members of parliament are calling it Hindu phobia. So these are the contemporary forms of religiophobia I was mentioning about. In fact, India sounded a warning note in the UN Security Council on 12th October 2021 when our Minister of State for External Affairs pointed to this contemporary forms of religiophobia. And he said, and I quote, "Our inability to even acknowledge these atrocities and phobias only gives these forces encouragement that phobias against some religions are more acceptable than those against the others." And he warned that we ignore this at our own peril. And sure enough, we had the International Day 5 months later. Understanding this distinction between terrorism and religiophobia is vital. And it's important that this difference is not papered over. And we are already seeing how this is taking root in the public discourse, especially in the West. Ironically, they are generating hatred against such communities in their own countries, their own citizens. And many of these are multi-religious and multicultural countries. This has serious implication for multicultural, pluralistic and democratic societies like India, leave alone their own societies. And pluralistic democracies cannot afford to watch the world go down this slippery slope, whether inside the UN or outside. India has a stake in ensuring that these values, our values, find greater resonance both in the UN and outside. And in spite of our traditional reticence in foreign policy to get involved in religious issues, we have no choice but to take the lead in the matter of contemporary forms of religiophobia. And this is important in combating terrorism in its broadest perspective. Friends, all I'd like to mention is that the next time you hear about a terrorist attack or a violent attack born out of a contemporary form of religiophobia, use the touchstone I have mentioned, and you'll realize why both these are dangerous for a pluralistic society like ours. And as our minister said in the Security Council, we ignore it at our own peril. I thank C3S once again for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on this very important occasion. And let me conclude by hoping that the idol of Surya, the sun god, who stands overlooking the corridor leading to the United Nations General Assembly, and the bust of Mahatma Gandhi, which has just been installed in December last year in the North Lawns of the United Nations, show an inclusive way forward to all members of the United Nations. And I thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Although I'm no more than an amateur to comment on your lecture, but allow me to congratulate you for having delivered such an engaging session and answering questions diplomatically. Undiplomatically. And before we disperse for tea, I would request the dignitaries to please, perhaps, how would you arrange it?
I think the first session,
Fi-
it may be difficult for him to climb, so we can start here itself.
Yes. I would request Commodore Vasan to please felicitate our guest, Ambassador T.S Tirumurti, with a memento.
Thank you, sir, for an outstanding talk.
Thank you, sir. And now we would disperse for tea for 15 minutes. Tea is available at the end of the hall. I request the participants, students, dignitaries to please engage and have a cup of tea. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the second half of today's program. I hope you've enjoyed your cup of tea and coffee. The need for a national security strategy has been for long a hue and cry for many among the strategic community, not only to mention that quite recently emphasized upon the former Chief of the Army Staff, General Naravane, a strategy that identifies ways and means to address various national security concerns is the need of the hour. This panel discussion, jointly organized by the C3S and the NMF, aims to deliberate upon the subject and the contours of India's national security strategy. It is my honor to invite another distinguished guest of ours, Rear Admiral S. Venkatraman, the Flag Officer commanding Tamil Nadu and Pondicherry Naval Area, to chair and moderate the session. I also have the honor to invite the eminent panelists, Commodore R.S. Vasan, Colonel R. Hariharan, and Air Marshal M. Matheeswaran, to join us.
Not very.
Okay, sure.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to thank Commodore Vasan for giving me this opportunity to be a part of this session and be among such luminaries. And thank you, Ambassador, for a very educative and illuminating talk. I learned a lot of things today. I'll speak on myself, sir. And like I said, among such luminaries, I can only speak for myself. I don't yet have the caliber to speak for each one of you. But notwithstanding, and we assemble again today to discuss another topic, quite relevant, topical, and I dare say very vital to India's future existence, particularly in such a complex, evolving global security scenario. Also, with India literally, geographically, and figuratively speaking, at the center of a probable emerging world order. Couple that with our national vision of Amrit Kal, leading up to the 2047 centenary of India's independence. In such a scenario, it is this topic, a need for a national security strategy, is indeed very relevant. The concept of national security, as such, to my mind, goes back to the start of civilization. It's been debated, discussed across centuries and ages, and to each and everyone it means different things, much like those 7 blind men and the elephant. Depends on who picks up what facet. Notwithstanding that, such debates and discussions are indeed essential, particularly in today's context. But before we really come to a national security strategy, the need of not of it, I would like to submit to this audience here that we should first address certain questions so that we get a more cogent and more logical answers. The first question, of course, is what is national security and what is that we want to secure? The what component, what, for whom, and why. And I guess Kautilya and Arthashastra puts it very succinctly. It says, Praja Sukhe, Sukhe Hitam, Praja Sukhe, Sukhe Ragya, Prajanam Sukhe Hitam, Na Atma Priyam Hite Ragya, Prajanam Tu Priya Hitam. The king shall see what pleases his subject and not pleases him. What is the welfare of the subjects and not his own welfare. So that, to my mind, in short 2 lines, describes national security. As the ambassador brought out in his lecture, this also means our own core beliefs, core values, culture, civilization constructs, etc. Does national security also mean what Cardinal Richelieu said, the 17th century statesman, raison d'etat, the reasons of state? So these are complex questions. So first we need to address the what, why, and for whom. Then we come to the how component of it, the policies, the objectives, and the strategies. Then we can come to, this is what the topic of discussion today is, as to what our strategy is going to be. And the strategies and why the how component also indicates the capabilities, resources a nation we have. If we don't have, do we have it in the future? So these complex questions again are best answered by Thucydides in his Peloponnesian War, his voluminous work during the Melian dialogue between Athens and Milos. The strong do what they can, the weak must suffer what they must. That's about capabilities of achieving our objectives. Today we have very illustrious, my colleagues, senior veterans from the armed services. Amongst them, they have more than a century of years of service to the nation. So I have no doubt that they'll be able to bring a lot of spotlight and a lot of nuances to this very important topic. And without taking much of your time and staying between you and these gentlemen, it is my privilege and a singular honor to introduce the individuals. Not that they need any introduction to this audience here. Nevertheless, I begin with Colonel Hariharan. Colonel Hariharan served in the Intelligence Corps of the Indian Army for more than 3 decades. His area of specialization included strategic security of South Asia, Indian Ocean, particularly the regions of Bangladesh, China, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, and the topics of terrorism and insurgency. He served in the intelligence staff and field appointments at various levels, including the Army headquarters. His training and development experiences include 2 tenures as the faculty head in the Military Intelligence School and as the head of Intelligence Training Section in the DGMI. He has a bachelor's degree with a postgraduate qualification in journalism from the Madras University. He is also qualified in Diploma in Training and Development Program of the Indian Society for Training and Development. The second panelist today, Commodore R.S. Vasan, is an alumnus of the Defense Services Staff College, the Naval War College, and the International Visitors Leadership Program of the United States. Commodore Vasan has a distinct career spanning 34 years in the Indian Navy and the Coast Guard. His wide-ranging appointments since commissioning in 1969, both at sea and ashore, include Commander of Warships, appointments in the carrier-borne wing of the erstwhile NS Vikrant, Examiner of the Air Crew Categorization and Standardization Board, the ACATS, the Chief Staff Officer, Operations at the Southern Naval Command, the Premier Training Command of the Indian Navy. He has also participated in the 1971 operations and the IPKF operations. His last assignment prior retirement was the Regional Commander, Coast Guard Region East. Since his retirement, he has been writing regularly for various magazines, newspapers, and websites. He has conducted workshops, delivering talks for international delegates in many parts of the world on maritime issues, diplomacy, strategy, security, and aviation issues. He is presently the Director General of Chennai Center for China Studies, Regional Director of the National Maritime Foundation, Chennai Chapter, and the Head Strategy and Security Studies at the Center for Asia Studies. A third distinguished panelist today is Air Marshal Mathishwaran, the Founder President, Peninsula Foundation. The Air Marshal, an Air Force veteran, is the Founder Chairman and President of TPF. He is the former Deputy Chief of the Integrated Defense Staff, Policy, Plans and Force Development, that looks at future perspective planning for the 3 services. He was a Senior Staff Officer, Air Staff Officer, or the Deputy CNC of the Eastern Air Command. The Air Marshal has an active service of 39 years in the Indian Air Force. Commissioned as a fighter pilot in 1975, he has flown more than 40 types of aircraft. Goodness. Almost 1 per year of service. He is a graduate of the Indian Air Force Elite Fighter Weapons Establishment, the Tactics and Air Combat Development Establishment, that is, and an experiment test pilot from the prestigious Flight Test Establishment. He has also commanded the Flight Test Establishment at Bangalore. The Air Marshal has held several command and staff appointments involving space, electronic warfare, information warfare, maritime air operations, air staff inspection, staff requirements, and the concepts and doctrines for air war strategy. An alumnus of the Defense Services Staff College, the National Defense College. He has done his doctor's a PhD in Defense Strategic Studies from the University of Madras and has a PG diploma in Finance Management from IGNOU. A senior fellow in the International and National Security from Harvard Kennedy School of Governance, he writes frequently on aerospace and defense issues, geopolitics, and national security. Now may we start the program, sir, and may I request Colonel Hariharan to give his perspectives on the need for national security strategy. Would you like to speak from there, sir?
No, I will come there. Ladies and gentlemen, I am standing in for General Shankar. So I have done this before also for C3S. I have no complaints about it because I'm quite familiar with the Army's security strategy. I presented a paper at the university on amphibious warfare. At the time, I had looked up our Army's latest strategy, which involves amphibious warfare. And later, I made a presentation for a civil service organization on the military intelligence in the 21st century in Indian context. So at the time also I had our strategy, Army strategy. 2011 paper was there on doctrine. One thing is, all these things, they discuss about the past. I don't think there is any use because 21st century is rewriting the way warfare is conducted. So the latest, I wrote an article in Tamil. They wanted one of the media guys whom I know on Ukraine, why war is continuing in Ukraine. So at the time also I had a military perspective. I have been following Ukraine war. So a number of developing trends which I have given here are very much relevant to any national security strategy of the Army. Firstly, then I'm sure you would have listened to Prime Minister Modi's powerful speech thanking the President in the Lok Sabha. He was listing all the achievements. Actually, it is what is called the comprehensive national power. That is the sum total. This is what China had introduced in 1980, formalized with Chinese Communist Party in 1992. It has got these 8 resources. So you cannot isolate Army, Navy and Air Force. Defense services strategy has to be to the overall strategy of the country. And how does it emanate? As a follower of Chinese history, I know it because a national vision has been built. A 50-year vision was conceived. China is advancing towards that. So, unless we have a national vision in which maximum people agree, this discussion, to my mind, has to be related only to comprehensive national power, which have got tangible aspects of resources, in which the military also is one of them. So based on what I have found as developing trends, first is hybrid warfare is here to stay. It is actually, the definition of hybrid warfare itself is elusive because different authors perceive it differently. But I feel it is a contourless war, a hybrid warfare. Actually, I believe the Cold War 2.0 is already on. Nobody knows when it started and where it will end. That is what is contributing to the perseverance of all the powers to pump in as much weapons as possible. Kindly keep it, Baba, otherwise I will forget. Put it full screen, please. So, another aspect is of hybrid warfare that is going on in Ukraine is contactless warfare. You see, today I do listen to BBC. Forgive me, because a lot of votaries are against BBC. It has become a morning habit. So, BBC proudly announces Russia has sent 50 missiles today, bombarded the Ukraine. Tomorrow I am waiting for the Americans to announce fresh missiles being sent. What I am saying is this contactless warfare is very expensive. I don't know the present cost of a missile. When I was being paid 500 rupees, 600 rupees as a captain, one round of artillery was costing 75 rupees. So you can imagine the comparative cost of missiles. It is a very expensive hobby. And who are the players who are reveling in it? Turkey, Iran, they have come with cheaper version. This is what is going to happen. Already the Azerbaijan is getting, Armenia is asking India for missiles. We are developing our own missiles. It is going to be, the next war will be, it won't have super-sized wars. It will be the man behind the gun will get diminished as technology improves. And there is subversion along with electronic media. There is a seamless connectivity between what is true and what is false about what is happening in Ukraine. I see RTV also, Russian TV. I see French TV, and I see, of course, CNN is inevitable, and our own TVs, though I avoid are now. See, these TVs, each day they give a different figure, because their idea is not giving news, but it is part of the subversion drama that each country is carrying out. This is what intelligence guys do. They suspect everybody. So I am also doing that. So electronic media, the bots are being used. I read an article that the Chinese have formed companies to use these bots to dominate the social media. The identification also have come. Then there are other remote operations. You know this Nord Stream 2 pipeline. Yesterday it has come officially unofficially in Western media that US Navy had carried out the Nord Stream 2 demolition, which was supplying natural gas to Germany from Russia. This is a remote operation. How you see how all this gel into one operation, cut Russia to size. This is what I see as the goal, not to liberate, that is incidental, liberating Ukraine. So in our context, it is very, very relevant, I feel. Then informatized battlefield operations. This is evident. You cannot handle missiles, fighters, artillery simultaneously from one command post. So multiple control centers are there. They are all brought on the same network-centric body, control room, and operated. I won't go into, because of, I don't want to dominate the discussion. I will leave it to C4SR and I systems. This is command control computers, surveillance, information, and reconnaissance. This is what it stands for. That is part of all our systems in Army, Navy, and Air Force. This will have to be strengthened and be sensitive to all these other things. Then operation has to be integrated. You see, Lockheed, the manufacturers, have brought out one of the websites I remember seeing on their marketing for defense goods. They say jointness first. They have discussed US, how US will use Air Force. And jointness is one thing. You might have seen Marines are shedding their separate Air Force. Unthinkable is happening. Why? Because of jointness. Aircrafts, fighter aircrafts have become very, very costly. So it has to be productive. That means whatever name you may call it. I don't want to go into an argument whether it is CDS or this discussion. But beyond that, you have to have joint operations. And jointness is not physically being present, but integrated operations. Coordination of civil military research, technology, production, and logistics. Actually, we have woken up 30 years after Chinese woke up. Chinese, as soon as President Xi came to power in 1913, first thing he did was the logistic operation using the trains, civilian trains for moving troops. It was a very big exercise that he carried out westwards. So after that, they evacuated Chinese from Libya using military aircraft. These are all exercises in coordination of civil military logistic, because the Communist Party Congress had decided that we are taking baby steps. Now, between our own departments, even within Army, there's a lot of difficulty in coordinating. I can imagine the problems in coordinating this. And it has to be combined battle groups. Unless you have that, you cannot carry out this exercise. That means the civilian logistics will be involved seamlessly on real-time basis. Then highly mobile, it has to be very fast because the reaction time is very short, getting short for commanders. At all levels, the decision making is, because artificial intelligence is helping the enemy as much as it is you are being helped. So it has to be short operations. If you see the Russian operation as well as Ukrainian thing, it is not like First World War. From trench to trench, they were jumping. It is strokes, significant strokes. Both sides are doing it badly. But that itself is a learning. They are learning. Actually, it is a lab for everybody. The American, the French AD systems have come there. They are trying out. The Germans are trying out. It is a very big laboratory where they are trying out various technologies. So the mobility, because this is what always after First World War, mobility, firepower, and command decision making, these have become very crucial. But it is being taken to newer levels of, so this is what we are learning, and our doctrines must reflect these things, not how we fought 1971 war. I am sorry, at that time only HF communication was there. Now every guy has got a mobile phone which is giving visual communication, and you will have a chat bot which will give you answers. So this is military technologies of the future. This is courtesy General Shankar. He has written about it. Actually, you should, particularly the younger lot, should read it. Of course, he would have written another paper today. He is faster than Raman in writing papers on military operations. So, but this paper is very highly engaging on how his perspective. He says military technologies of the future, quantum computing, AI, it has to incorporate. Then there is civilian Starlink and SpaceX. These are private operators who are offering to Ukraine. You see this perspective. When somebody is trying to block your space communication. Cyber, I already talked about networking, but it is also for disrupting. Cyber communication, disruptive technologies are being introduced, and they are being built in also in the same communication system. This will assume greater velocity. Additive technologies. This is related to metallurgy, he explains. How the new alloys will be give additional advantage. As an artilleryman, he is talking. And as an artillery guy of vintage, I can understand it. Because we used to throw away the barrel after firing the 2,000 rounds. Now high velocity guns are there. They are from 28,000 yards, we have gone to 28 kilometers now. So the ordinary field gun I am talking. So what happens is, this additive technology we are not using, he says, whereas it is available, our steel mills and alloy mills are making it, we are not using it, optimizing. Fusion technology, this is for high altitude thinking. You might remember we captured Siachen Glacier, about 3,000 kilometers, square kilometers, we captured, defeating Pakistanis. But helicopters couldn't reach supplies. This is the reality. Now, of course, we are trying to design helicopters for higher altitude. Warm clothing. The incremental levels of the artillery ammunition has to be given. There are ammunition specially designed for this. Of course, communication and networking, it should be independent of all other networks. Army is actually, it is being designed, I think. All the three services are being given. This is what he has given, technology of the future. Next one, please. I have got only 2 more slides. What should Army be doing? It is reassess threats, restructure, rebalance forces, reform mindsets. I think the last reform mindsets is the most important. because we tend to do what we had been doing because it's convenient. Our mind is programmed like that. We have to depart from that. Revamp leadership in multi-domain operation. This is the most difficult thing I can see. From changing one weapon to another is you start, it is like stock market, you start loving some stocks because they have yielded results. But that is the most detrimental thing in stock market. So it is like that. So we have to revamp our mindsets to multi-domain leadership. Acquire technology skills. Now every soldier has to have some technology orientation. You might laugh at the Agniveer or whatever it is. I personally feel it is a right direction, but whether it will produce or not is a big question. It will produce the required results. Chinese army took this initiative much earlier. They were recruiting tech graduates. We are also recruiting engineers, more and more levels. At Jawan's level, it should be at least, he should be able to orient himself to the modern weaponry. He had, this is actually his suggestion, General Shankar's suggestion. I think Navy has done it very well. The HRD projects must be, of DRDO must be headed by the arm concerned. Otherwise the results won't come. There are vested interests blocking this. It has to become part of Army's strategy. The plan, very simple. You have to acquire knowledge on emerging technologies. Our institutions, teaching institutions have to change. We should know what we want, how to acquire that also. It is not that Army is the repository of all wisdom or other services. There is a lot of wisdom available. And demand structural reforms. Now it is top down. What the ministries do. It has to be bottom up. This is it will require a huge change in mindset of both army and bureaucracy. Of course, there is no option but training. Army as it is spends 4 months in a year in training. The next one, please. So, very simple. Yeah, we finished. He is whispering time limit. I myself want to get out. Because it is a summary of what is happening. I have summarized in 3 bullet points. Use modern weapons as part of network-centric asymmetric battlefield. This is how it's going to be. Use automatic and automated weapons. Some weapons will be automatically, they will pick up targets and engage. They will become key elements. I don't want to dwell on Ukraine operation. Many have been, these experiments have been carried out. Yes. Be ready to, even the Azerbaijan, Armenia operations also, many of these lessons have come out. They be ready to face directed energy. The future battlefield is going to face this. All these safeguards will become untenable when battlefields come under directed energy, electric and electronic systems. And these countermeasures have to be central. It cannot be done by the Army, Navy or Air Force. It has to be, the country has to be aware and incorporate it. This is how I feel the national security strategy for Army and land perspective should be formed. with that, I end my presentation. If you have any questions, you can shoot me.
Thank you, sir, for that very educative talk. We'll take the questions once we finish the session. So keep your powders dry. So Colonel Hariharan has really covered this, and he's focused on technology, futuristic technology, insofar as the land battles go. But he's brought a very important point of, and I think that's stuck in my mind too, is of change of mindsets. Typically the militaries plan and train for the previous war and not for the future war. And that's a very, one of the shortcomings the military mind has got. And I think the British historian, Little Hart, put it very succinctly. A thing more difficult than getting a new idea into military mind is to take the old one out. So now I invite Commodore Vasan to cover the maritime dimensions of national security.
Thank you, Chair. I think Colonel Hariharan has made my job simpler, particularly on the technology dimensions, on the mindset, etc. I would just like to spend just 2 minutes on what I said in the morning. When you look at national security strategy, we should not mistake it with individual strategies of services. They're required. Like I said earlier, these are the means to an end. And therefore, what the chair brought out in his opening remarks on what the Raja has to do for the Praja, that summarizes the national security strategy. Simple. It can't be simpler than that. If you are able to provide that secure environment, if you can provide that stability to him, and therefore he is prosperous, you find your objectives are achieved. So to enable this environment, what should the rest of the people do? Whether it's a food ministry, agriculture ministry, or S&T ministry, or military, or whatever. So they have a role to do to ensuring that the Raja is able to discharge these duties. So in summation, can we reduce the volume? I think there's a lot of reverberation. So it's important to understand that national security strategy, which is, I also quoted the examples of Japan, USA, and Australia, where what has been brought out is nothing to do with military technology. It's nothing to do with any other forms of discussion that have been included there. It is to say that what are my larger objectives when I talk about national security? So do I have an enabling environment? If not, how do I create that enabling environment? That is what is important. Colonel Hariharan made this reference to how a lot of things have changed after Xi Jinping came. Specific to the theatre commands, which had become a hot point of discussion in India. Very hot point here to say, the theatre commands, why are we getting the theatre commands here just because China got it or somebody has it, etc., etc. Yes, we need to have those discussions. But in the case of Xi Jinping, there he is also the CMC, the military commission. He's a president, so he can do anything that he wants. Over here, we have a proper debate. So it's important to understand what the local environment is, what our system of governance is. You cannot have the same kind of methods applied here in India or in USA or in Australia, which are democracies, compared to what was applied in China or for Russia for that matter. So these differences must be clearly understood. So in this backdrop of what national security strategy is, which is very different, we may have another discussion entirely on national security strategy, on what all should it encompass, and therefore how should we frame it for a common man to understand as to what are we talking about when we talk about national security strategy. It already exists in many forms. It may be like Professor Suryanarayan was part of the National Security Advisory Board. We've had people who have been in different echelons of national security architecture. All this is already there. It's a question of formalization, putting into a 30, 40, 50-page document to say, this is what I want to do in the next 10 years or 20 years, so that the agencies concerned are quite clear about how to go about this business of complementing the national objectives on security. So I thought that I'd just make that very clear so that there's no, particularly amongst the young students, I know there are a lot of young students, so they should not have any doubts in their mind as to, is military strategy the same as national security strategy? One complements the other. Okay, so with that, let me go through a structured presentation because it's important to stick to my time. So can we have the first slide, please? very, very appropriate. Strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. But the tactics without strategy is the noise before the defeat. There are a lot of things that have been brought out by Sun Tzu. Every single word is so relevant to what we do today, even including when we discuss strategy, or military strategy for that matter. Okay, so I particularly recommend to the young students to go through the various, treatises on Sun Tzu's quotes, which can be, each one of them can be expanded. Next. I will definitely look at the maritime dimensions of how it can be an enabler for national security strategy. That's what I am going to look at. Therefore, what plays the most important? One by one. Maritime geography. Look at the Indian Ocean region. We are in the center. We have our neighbors. We have 2 nuclear neighbors. We have those offshore islands. You have the sea lanes of communications which are going around, which carry 10,000 ships. So, this, and we have an exclusive economic zone of 200 nautical miles, which gives you 2.10 square kilometers. My Coast Guard friends will tell you the importance of exclusive economic zone. And also the search and rescue zones, which is double that of the exclusive economic zone at 4.1 million square kilometers. Next. Neighborhood. You can't change your geography, which is what everybody tells you. So if you have a geography here, which has Bangladesh, Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Nepal, Bhutan, etc., then some of them are land neighbors, some of them are maritime neighbors, some of them are both, like Bangladesh and Pakistan. How do you deal with this situation? Particularly when you are dealing with the kind of governance which is so very different in each of these countries. Some claim to be democracies, they are not. So in Myanmar, you see what's happening. So can you close your eyes to what's happening in Myanmar and say, I'll have my own strategy? This is the question that needs to be addressed by policymakers. Next. Power play dynamics. When you have an emerging economy like India, so there are a lot of interests. There are people who would like to come and invest here. So are you in a position to provide that kind of an environment? People are trying to move away from China. China is a big extra-regional player here. Just like USA is. USA is not integral to Indian Ocean region. So therefore, these power play dynamics which are there will influence the way you implement your national security strategy objectives. That must be clearly understood. Next. I mentioned briefly about sea lines of communication. They are the lifelines. Let's face it. If India has to sustain itself, it has to import this 85% of energy from Middle East or from wherever. Likewise, if it has to engage in EXIM, that's export or imports, then it requires the sea lines of communication. It requires ports. It requires the related infrastructure for transportation. Containers, container yards. Captain Bangara, who's here, will tell you a lot more about this, and he's written about it, about the importance of merchant marine fleet to our existence. Next. Comprehensive maritime power. We attempt to mistake the naval power as maritime power. Naval power is only part of a comprehensive maritime power. And comprehensive maritime power is part of the comprehensive national power. So let's make no mistakes about the interrelation between naval power, the maritime power, and the comprehensive national power. Once you understand this, then I think there will be a lot more clarity in how we address these issues. Next. So obviously, whenever you are trying to do it, of course, I'm not looking at the national security strategy where these things have to be carried out in terms of SWOT analysis, vis-a-vis your neighbors, vis-a-vis your neighborhood. But within the Navy, again, you carry out your SWOT analysis, where technology which Colonel Hariharan brought out plays an important role today. You've seen unmanned underwater vehicles, you have drones, you have UCAVs, that is drones which are capable of carrying out attacks. And the Navy has leased 2 of these drones which can fly up to Sunda Straits on one side and all the way up to African coast if required. So this is what is an enabler of your maritime domain awareness, of which I'm going to talk about a little later. Next. So look at this, because the one picture is with 1,000 words. So when you look at this, things will remain in your mind as to where we are. This is our neighborhood. You have on one side the Arabian Sea, you have Bay of Bengal on the other side, you have Maldives, Sri Lanka, you have Seychelles, Oman, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and China, of course, the extra-regional player. I keep emphasizing the fact that it's an extra-regional player. But phenomenal, legitimate interest in the Indian Ocean region, because it's also a seafarer. And South China Sea, which is there. These are things that will definitely be taken into consideration. So in this context, what Sardar Panikkar has written about so many years ago is very important. India never lost her independence till she lost the command of the sea in the first decade of the 16th century. Next. Right. So I already emphasized the fact that naval power is not maritime power. It's maritime power also does not just include naval power, but what does it include? Next. Shipping fleets, shipyards, deep sea. We do not play that much of importance to these things which are the lifelines of the nation, the arteries of the nation. When you have a well-equipped, modernized port, you'll be providing that kind of competition. You'll be accelerating the process in JNPT, in Ennur, and wherever else which is there. And Captain Bangara will tell you a lot more about this. He's written about it, and I must thank him for sharing one of the articles recently, which will also go up in our website. So this is where we have to understand that, when you're talking about comprehensive maritime power, it includes all this. Deep sea ports. Next. Seafarers. We are very proud to say that something like 14% of the global seafarers are from India. But is that good enough? Are they in a position to influence something? In IMO, for that matter, or for anywhere else? Whereas, when you compare it with the tonnage of India, it's at a staggering low. I'm using the word staggering, but it's low at less than 2%. Whereas China has monopolized the entire global tonnage, something like 80 to 85% of global tonnage. Even your goods go on Chinese ships. This is the reality. So they are in a position to control the complete maritime trade that goes on. And in fact, some of the first-hand reports tells us that during COVID time, wherever there were Indian captains and others, they made it a point to hold them in China. These are first-hand accounts. My own nephew is in Merchant Navy and he was stuck there. On some funny reason, they would just hold on. So they are in a position to manipulate the trade which is so important to us. The exports, imports which are so important to us. These must be understood for us when you are formulating the maritime strategy. Next. Fishing fleets. We are doing quite well as a fishing, but unfortunately when you look at the infrastructure that's supporting it, we are not good. Let's face it. The cold chain that has to go from seaports to hinterland, no, that is not existing. We do not, employ deep sea fishing at all. We continue to poach in Ramnad and along Sri Lanka because you don't have fish here. But as Professor Suryanarayan always makes it a point to tell us, it's only in the Indian exclusive economic zone that fish die of old age because you don't catch them. So no, these are the harsh realities. So what is the government doing about promoting deep sea, fishing? So therefore, when you are talking about comprehensive maritime power, it includes all this. And not just the Indian Navy, which has got carriers, nuclear submarines, and destroyers and all that, showing their flags all over. Yes, that's also important. But more important to me is this understanding of the maritime environment. Next. Blue economy. A lot of thrust is being given because it's also part of the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. And it's an important component of nation building through ocean harnessing. Are we doing enough? There are questions here about how you are sustaining. It's a sustainable development through the harnessing of the oceans. Whether it's fisheries wealth, tourism, or whether it is building of even artificial islands is allowed. Generation of energy through wind waves, offshore thermal, OTEC, etc. Next. Recent initiatives in ocean demand. Luckily, I think we have some good agencies here. The National Institute of Ocean Technology, they perfected the art of going down to 6 kilometers underwater and picking up samples, the nodules and those kind of things. Today, it is perhaps cost prohibitive to do deep sea mining, but a day will come when you perhaps have to go to the oceans, including for your protein requirements. NSTL, National Scientific and Technological INCIOS, they're providing phenomenal information, particularly during storm warnings, tidal currents, or even search and rescue. These are our assets. They contribute to your comprehensive maritime power. Next. Tsunami warning. Today after 2004, it's NIOT which has laid these buoys by pattern, which gives you at least 2.5 hours of warning time if there is an earthquake in Java, Sumatra belt. And so you are able to warn your people and move them in lands. Next. Of course, my Indian Coast Guard guys should be very happy with highlight which is here, which is the humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, the search and rescue, and marine pollution control and EEZ protection are part of the charter as enshrined in the Maritime Zones of India Act 1976. And therefore, that's given the Coast Guard. It's not that they work away from the Navy, but there's a close coordination between the Navy and the Coast Guard to ensure that we protect our exclusive economic zone and the shores from poaching and other various things which are happening. Next. So sound strategy for all-round development of related infrastructure, which is whether it's deep sea water ports. You've seen how everything gets politicized here. Vizhinjam just doesn't take off. Kolachal doesn't take off. So every day we have these issues with developing our infrastructure. Same story with deep sea fishing, because I do clearly remember that the center said will give 50%, the states will give 30%, and 20% will be borne by the owners. And you please invest in deep sea fishing, but yet the numbers are, you can count them on your hand. So obviously there's something that's lacking in our approach to harnessing the oceans. Next. Education, training and skill development. A lot of this also goes into what Colonel Hariharan also brought out about preparing the future generation for the future wars. War, I'm not talking only about broadsides and firing on each other, but war in terms of technological domain, in terms of various other innovations. And like this recent thing that this balloon which was there spying all over, there's a technology, where finally even America was compelled to choose a window in which it can shoot down this balloon so that they can retrieve all the. So there's a level to which it has gone. So where the Chinese call it as hybrid war or informatization war. So all this is what we have to prepare our sailors for. Of course, Fortna will tell you that yes, we are doing very well on these grounds of training our warriors in the future. Next. Well, what should the Navy therefore provide? The ability to provide national interests, national maritime interests, which are up to 200 nautical miles in the lexicon and so on. It's along your coast, it's in your neighborhood. So you should have the ability to promote such engagement with neighborhood to see that our national maritime interests are served. So some examples I can quote later, perhaps during Q&A, because time constraints are there. Otherwise, initiatives such as Milan, as Dosti, which is a trilateral between Maldives, Sri Lanka and us, or the MDA, the Maritime Domain Awareness Program, which is taken off in a big way. These are things that are so important for us to see that we use this as a strength. The geographical location of India, jetting into the Indian Ocean region, your offshore islands, Port Blair, which serve as outposts close to the Malacca Straits, and on the left, Lakshadweep, Minica Islands. These are assets. These are assets for you which has allowed you to expand your horizons. Next. Indian Ocean region, which is your primary area of interest. We might still continue to operate in South China Sea, go and do exercise with Japan, do Malabar somewhere else. The point is, your primary area of interest for India is Indian Ocean region. This must be clearly understood. So when you are able to control the narrative here, you find you have done your job. And that's done by excellent, healthy arrangements with your neighbors, a sense of confidence in them that India, a big brother, will come to their aid, like it happened in the case of Sri Lanka, where he given something like $3.9 billion of aid. So, there are a lot of things which can be done in a proactive manner using both your soft power and hard power credentials. Next. Areas of interest overseas, this will remain, because even to the South China Sea, there's something like $3.5 trillion of goods passed through, Indian goods which are going there. And we also have now engaged in the so-called Chennai to Vladivostok route. All this will become reality. So when these become reality, our overseas interest will also go up. And also there is a sizable diaspora, in all these areas. So we have not used them enough. Ambassador Tirumurti will be able to, of course, tell you more about it, about our initiatives to try and engage them. Look at the Chinese diaspora. It's amazing what they do to their own country in terms of investment, in terms of exchange of S&T, including espionage. I'm not saying that our Indians abroad should indulge in espionage, but I'm saying, there's a level to which they go to serve their national interests, and we are nowhere near them. Next. Nuclear sea-based deterrence. This again, if you have to protect your national interests, and developing nuclear sea-based deterrence was one such option, we've done that. Thanks to the planners in the Navy and the nation policymakers and DRDO who come together, and they were able to have Hariharan coming out. So which has given us that kind of a capability. 2 more add-ons apparently are out there serving your national interests. So the sea-based deterrence is something which has been effective, and it definitely contributes to the process of deterrent. Next. Ability to count both traditional and non-traditional threats. I'm not going to list them. Traditional, you all understand. It's about a military threat like it happened in 71 war. But non-traditional threats are which will be there 365 days. Whether it is IUU, which is illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing, which is happening in your exclusive economic zone. As I'm talking to you today, there must be at least 10 Chinese ships somewhere just on the border of EZ, waiting to see when the petrol ships move away, come in and poach. Taiwanese ships. Every kind of vessels are here, and it happens everywhere, wherever there are fishermen. So the other things are about fire piracy, and we are talking about non-traditional threats, marine pollution, dumping of toxic waste, human smuggling. So all these are issues for which both the Navy and the Coast Guard have their plans, and they are carrying out these patrols in different areas, including aerial patrol, drone patrols, and that's what is helping us to maintain a certain amount of credible deterrence against non-traditional threats. Next. Credible maritime domain awareness. This is something which has worked out very well for us. We have these headquarters in Delhi, and there are these arrangements which enable us to look at the complete kind of traffic and determine whether it's a white hull, that is white ship. White ship means it's safe, or some other ship which needs to be investigated further. And HIDR, after tsunami, I think we've retuned, tweaked our complete procedures, and we are in a position to respond not only through the maritime forces and pollution control vessels of the Coast Guard, but also through the NDRF, the National Disaster Relief Facilities, which are, even today, as I'm talking to you, our people are in Turkey. So that is the kind of response mechanism that is with us. Next. Capacity and capability to match intentions. Simple, in one line. What are national intentions? What are the national strategy security objectives? And therefore, do you have the capacity? If not, what are you doing about it? Is it through imports? Is it through Atmanirbharata? Is it through some other means? Is it through alliances? And capability. Capability is coming through your own training processes, your joint exercises, your computer simulated wargaming. Everything is contributing to this process of capacity and capability. Next. So what is the SWOT analysis? This is something that we need to constantly engage in. What does China have? What do I have? In terms of mere numbers, China has more numbers than even America. But is that good enough? So there has to be both a quantitative and a qualitative analysis on what they do. So they will find it still very hard to come into Indian Ocean region because they have to keep at least 35% of their assets in South China Sea, where they have illegally acquired assets. So they can't come here. And plus there is what's called the tyranny of distance. If they have to come all the way from South China Sea into Indian Ocean region, they have to spend 8 to 10 days. That means the crew have been tested, their fuel logistic chains have been extended. So these are things which will tell you, what advantages you have, and therefore you need to be playing to your advantages or strengths. Shore-based aviation for LRMRSW, this has been a force multiplier, the term that we normally use, the P8Is which we imported from USA during this standoff. They are providing information not just to the Navy, but they are providing information to the Army and the Air Force, flying along the LAC, spotting their... so this is something that has helped us. Next. CONOPS essentially, how does the Navy operate? There's a concept of operations. In our case, we have looked at the carrier battle group supported by the surface fleet, and then of course the nuclear submarines which are doing their job. They could even be patrolling ahead of the carrier battle group. And then the shore-based aviation, which also provide this kind of sanitization efforts ahead of the fleet before they go in the harm's way. Next. Effective sea control, sea denials. During 71 war, we know for sure that we are able to exercise complete sea control in the North Arabian Sea. And a smaller nation which does not have the wherewithal resorts to what's called the sea denial, which is by use of mines, use of midget submarines, or submarines on a protective, etc. So we have come beyond that, because today there is a complex maritime environment where you can't say that I'll enforce complete blockade out there. We did that and we got away in 71, but perhaps you will not be able to do this. So these are options that are available to us. Next. Integral layer consisting of AW halves. So I think we're trying to leave here with the commissioning of Vikrant. The good news, as you have seen in the newspaper, is that both the LC and the MiG-29s have carried out the trial demonstrations, and therefore we are very, very happy that there will be 2 carriers here, while the decision for the third is awaited. But this is what we are saying, that when your fighter aircraft, etc. Today, of course, there's a theoretical capability of the Air Force to reach anywhere, right up to Africa. But the point is that, do you have it when you need it? And this is where the aircraft carrier provides you the options. Next. So this is another important aspect, which is also covered earlier. So the network-centric operations and network-centric warfare, we are enabled now, and I'm sure it will be further refined. We have an excellent communicator, Admiral here, who will perhaps tell you more about it in terms of how well we are prepared in terms of using satellite communications and using many operational flexibility for promoting the way you engage in the maritime domain. Next. Intelligence sharing, this is going on with our partners. Quad has given you a certain amount of option. Everybody tells you it's not a military alliance, but behind the scenes there is a lot that's going on in terms of exchange of information. Next. Quad. So this is where we come back to the SWOT analysis and say that if I cannot do it on my own because of the economic differential that I have with China. Now I have $3.5 trillion and China is at $15 trillion and America is at $21 trillion. What do I do? How do I bridge this gap? So obviously the only thing that gives you an answer is the alliances. So Quad to a certain extent gives you that kind of an opportunity, particularly in the Indo-Pacific Ocean initiatives. The amount of things which have been listed there is phenomenal. You would not have been able to do it on your own. Just last month, I think there were 25 students from India who got into that exchange program of 100 university students. So how would you have done it on your own? To train them in the best of the universities. So it's a question of looking at an option, looking at opportunities, looking at how it complements your national strategy, and indulge and engage in it. Next. IRA, ions and all, I'm not going to discuss too much about this, but there are existing mechanisms which allows you to look at the options that are available by engaging with like-minded people in the IORA, there's an Indian Ocean region area, and also the IONS, which is purely a naval initiative. They got together the heads of the Navy all around. It's become a wonderful platform today for the navies of the world to look at how they can engage with each other and how they can share it. Remember, a lot of these have also resulted in some of the instruments such as the Limova, the exchange of operations. So that means an American ship which is here can take fuel and something else here from Chennai and move on, while we can go to one of their bases and use their facilities, etc. So a lot of these options are available to you. I'm not going into detail because of time constraints, but we can take them on if required during the Q&As. Next. Atmanirbharta is the slogan, but I think we have to understand what the limitations are. It cannot be done overnight. Simple. It will take 5 years or 10 years or whatever. In the interim, how do you meet your strategy security needs? That is what will be haunting the policymaker out there. The fact that you imported 36 of the Rafales is something that was the hour of the need. Likewise, today I are looking at the Rafales for the carrier, because our MiG-29s have had their own issues, and the follow-on of the LCA Tejas, the twin-engined model is at least 5 years away, if not more. Next. So these are the way-ahead options, in my opinion, in terms of how we can utilize our maritime power for nation building and for complementing the national security strategy objectives. Getting the fundamentals right, and a lot of this is also to do with what Colonel Hariharan also brought out in terms of being ahead of the curve and training our future generations in next generation warfare. Greater focus on all-round development of comprehensive maritime power, which is lost sight of, unfortunately. Just because you have an excellent navy, you think you have done your job. It's not so. I re-emphasize the fact that we need to invest a lot more in our merchant marine and our infrastructure, on our modernization of container ports, automatic handling. None of our ports are anywhere in the top 20, which is a reality. Whereas there are 5 ports of China which are in the top 40. So these are things that we should make us feel very concerned about how much we've invested in the maritime constituency. To be accepted as first responder, Well, everybody has accepted it. So I think by and large, this is one area we are fairly comfortable. We are always almost the first to respond. Whether it's a chemical tanker that sank off Sri Lanka, whether it's Gal which was littered with garbage after tsunami which we cleared in 24 hours, or whether it's Indonesia where we went immediately after tsunami. By and large, we've been able to do that. Or whether it's Maldives which faced water crisis. We've been able to respond. So that means within the Indian Ocean region, we've been first responders. So while there are a lot of questions again on are you a net security provider, are you a net security facilitator, or are you a net security coordinator, it doesn't matter. The point is that you are there, you are in the center of all this action. So you see what is required and what is received well. And then strengthening bilateral, trilateral and multilateral engagements with other maritime nations. Blue economy, as I said, which is also part of the SDG and your commitment to climate. And strengthening of the shipping and port infrastructure, which I think should be topmost in our minds. Next. Well, this sums it up all. And this was not said today. This was by Admiral Mahan, who said whoever controls the Indian Ocean will dominate Asia. And this ocean will be the key to 7 seas in the 21st century. It is already happening. The destiny of the world will be decided in its waters. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, Commodore Vasan, for that excellent talk of yours. Cover the entire gamut of maritime requirements as what it means to be a maritime power. You emphasized upon the geographical location of India, rightly so, as also the gamut of activities which happens on the seas, from shipping to trade and commerce to fishing, undersea exploration, undersea resources, and so on and so forth. And all that, of course, underpinned by being a strong naval power, because ultimately all this needs to be protected. And the reason why I'm talking to you in English today, not in French, is because of that. Because from 1784, when Suffren, the French admiral based out of Mauritius, withdrew from the very Coromandel coast here, and effectively signaling the French's ceding back from India. And that's how the British gained control. So 1784 to 1941, the fall of Singapore, it was the Indian Ocean of the British Lake. So herein lies the importance of being a strong naval power. But I will just set the cat amongst the pigeon here. Is India a maritime power or a continental power? And to me, in the current emerging world order, possibly it's maybe Indo-Pacific world order and a continental world order. So India is geographically at the center of both these world orders. So ladies and gentlemen can probably ask this question to our eminent panelists as to where the primacy lies, if at all there's a primacy in the first place. Thank you so much, sir, for that talk. May I now request Air Marshal Mathishwaran to cover his aspects of the air dimensions of national security strategy.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and as the last speaker, I don't want to take too much of time between you and the lunch, and I'll keep it short. There are no PowerPoints. Okay. Just continuing with what the Admiral said, why did the French withdraw and why did it become British Lake? Well, Louis XIV had overextended himself in military operations in the European continent, and he ran out of complete resources and money, and therefore they had to take a rational choice because they couldn't pump in enough resources to battle with the British on the Indian Ocean. That's one of the fundamental reasons. And that's what I'm bringing the point on national security strategy. Until the end of Second World War, you would have not heard this term. All countries had war ministries. They didn't even call it the defense ministry. The term defense ministry came after 1945, right? And war ministries were quite aggressive, explicit. The intentions were quite clear. We are there to prosecute war for the benefit of the country. In a way, that's national security strategy as well. But why do we need a national security strategy post-1945? And you need to link it up because it's multidimensional and it has economic, political, technological, and then military dimensions to it. Military is only an instrument of the final usage if you have to use. And there are 2-3 important lessons that history has taught us. One is, Plato said 2,500 years ago, only the dead have seen the end of war. So you'll never see the end of war unless you're dead, right? And the second one is the Roman general Vegetius, who said, if you desire peace, be prepared for war. Both give you very strong messages. And somewhere we made mistakes in this process. As a young growing country, post 1947, starting from scratch, the British had looted us for 200 years and left with nothing. You had to rebuild yourself. And therefore, political leaderships have problems in prioritizing their resources for development as well as security. National security is all about internal and external security, territorial integrity. We live in a world which has been dominated by the Western system for nearly 5 centuries. As the ambassador pointed out in his speech, the Christian dimension to the international order is really very, very strong. When they moved across to the Americas and they asked for taking certain steps, the Pope gave them the sanctity of killing the locals because they are below human levels. And that is how the slaughtering of South American indigenous tribes, or the North American indigenous tribes, took place. The British were no different in India. By one study, they killed 165 million Indians in the entire period. By another study, and a famous British economist study, 45 trillion pounds of wealth was looted from India between 1857 and 1947, not in the entire period, right? So, international system is a ruthless system, and it has become more ruthless post 1945. And how has that happened? The Second World War gave the elements of what constitutes a strategy in the modern world, the 20th century and 21st century. So the US, in the thick of the Second World War, you had a General Hap Arnold, who was the commander of the US Army Air Forces. The US Air Force is younger than the Indian Air Force. We came into existence in 1932. They came into existence in 1947 by the National Security Act. So he was commanding the US Army Air Forces during the Second World War. And he calls in 1944, he has a meeting with Theodor von Karman, a famous aerodynamicist who had his own laboratory, Guggenheim Aeronautics Laboratory, and the University of UCLA. Well, he calls him to advise him that the end of the war is nearing and we need to make out our strategy, because the US is going to be the dominant power, and the US has ensured the 500-year-old Eurocentric system is now dead, and the world should be an American century and should be an American world. And the leading technologies that will dictate those terms are in air and space capabilities. So Theodor von Karman said they were very good friends. Their friendship lasts from late 1920s. But he said, I'm not working under a military leader. I'm a scientist. Leave me alone. He said, no, you are the guy who's going to advise us. We'll give you a full team, and you'll have all the resources to pick up from all over the world, and you give us a report. So he gave them, he actually formed the first scientific advisory board, which now exists in the US Air Force since then. And they formed a team of 12 people, including Dresden, who went on to be the first head of NASA subsequently. They took an aircraft, went to a place called Peenemünde in Germany, and that had been the Allied forces that captured certain very important treasures in Peenemünde, because that was this research center for the Germans. 1,500 tons of research materials were airlifted from there to the US. The Russians, when they captured Berlin, they took a few. And both sides benefited immensely in their scientific growth from then on. And what was that scientific growth about? The spin-offs into civil and commercial sectors were subsequent, but they were all focused primarily on the military. Wernher von Braun, who should have logically been tried at the Nuremberg, was picked up from there, given amnesty, and then he went on to head NASA subsequently. He was the father of the Saturn III launch vehicle program, into the entire moon exploration program. So the nations create that strategy, and that strategy of the US is to create an architecture of the international system that we still live in today, which is built on 3 pillars: economic. The Bretton Woods system favors the American system that has led to the US dollar being the reserve currency of the world. Second is the political structure, which gets dominated in the UN Security Council, dominated by the US and its allies. And the third one is technological pillar, or the science, research, and development. And that technological strength allows US to dictate terms to the rest of the world by creating denial regimes so that you don't get access to those technologies easily. And the rest of the world depends on the US and its allies giving you what they need to give you, sell it the way they want to sell it, and dominate the global economy. So you have a scientist called Kondratiev, a Russian economist, who has studied this long cycles of technology and economy of the world in the modern period, and he finds that the world economy goes in cycles of 70 to 100-year cycles. There's another person who's also done the similar study called Immanuel Wallerstein, whose famous study is on world economy theory. But this 70-year cycles, we are in the sixth quantitative cycle. Each cycle is dominated by a technology of the day, the leading technology of the day. And the country that dominates that leading technology dominates the world economic system. It has the strongest military. It ensures that it retains that. The battle is this. So in the first two cycles, the British Empire dominated the textiles, rail, and shipping. And the next two cycles, the Americans have come in. Or next three cycles, the Americans have come in, which has moved on. We are into the sixth cycle, which is aerospace, information, and the fusion technologies that are coming in, like nanotechnologies, biotechnologies coming in a big way. And countries that are going to be having control over critical technologies in these areas will call the shots of the international order, will dominate trade and economy in the world. China has understood this extremely well. So if you study Chinese aerospace growth, in the 1970s and 1980s, they were no better than our ability to license, produce, manufacture, and develop our own aircraft. If anything, we produced the first fighter aircraft in the 1960s, HF-24, probably before the Chinese. Right? I'm talking about in a modern sense. But the Chinese created exceptionally strong research systems. And between 1989 and 2010, 2015 time frame, the aerospace sector has rocketed phenomenally. Of course, they've used all methods. They've used espionage, they've used coercive business strategies, they have used money to buy off what they want. Everything has a price, and they've understood that logic extremely well, and they plugged a lot of gaps in their capabilities. So from an industry that was capable of producing a MiG-21 replica as F-7 or F-9 as they call it, they were, in 2010, a fifth generation fighter aircraft J-20 comes out of the drawing boards. It goes through the development process. It is now operationally inducted into the PLA Air Force. Similarly, they take the aircraft carrier from Ukraine, rebuild it, and then you have the first aircraft carrier. They've taken the same time as we have taken for the first aircraft carrier, indigenous one. But the second and third and the fourth are coming in very quick succession. That doesn't come without building very strong foundational strength. And therefore, I go back into history again. Deng Xiaoping, when he took over in the 70s, he understood the Mao Zedong's People's Militia, PLA, is a nonsense, or it has outlived its utility. And therefore, to build China, he said you have to bring in capitalism. He brought in the 4 modernization principles, and he said, he gave the instructions, keep quiet on the borders, we need peace to grow. And that's what they did. But PLA is not easy to control. They were demanded by themselves. So what did he do? In one of the meetings, he actually calls PLA, it is a slothful, arrogant, and a stupid organization which needs to be taught a lesson. Right? And what does he do? By some conjectures, it is Deng Xiaoping who engineered the war in Vietnam. And Vietnam has come out absolutely, hardened, battle-hardened with the Vietnam War of 20 years plus. And they gave them a bloody nose. And that gave them the excuse to restructure PLA completely. So the four modernizations played a major role in China's transformation. That is strategy. That is national strategy. Right? And this is what we need to look at. We need to understand, for a long time, we felt military is eating into development priorities and therefore constrain the, even today we have the same problem, constrain the allotment of funds to military. We need to understand, you have to have a strategy which meets your immediate requirements, medium-term requirements, and the long-term strategy, there's no change. Long-term strategy is to have technology controls in critical areas, to have, or not to be a lackey to anybody else in the world, to be able to be independent yourself. What does that mean? In the international order, you should be able to write rules and standards. Today we are not. How will you be able to write rules and standards? If you're able to dictate terms in the economy and if you're able to dictate terms on technology issues, then you will be able to do that. And this is what we should do. So there needs to be a long-term strategy that needs to address that part. And that needs continuity. So we need to examine this. This is the problem. We are apprehensive that if we put out a strategy in writing, then we are tying ourselves into knots, is one of the concerns of the government, which is rightly so. But I think time has come. We were very weak in the 40s, 50s. The 62 war gave us a wake-up call. We rebuilt our military. 71 was a fabulous example of good strategic sense, capturing the opportunity and executing it extremely well. We did that well. Thereafter, we gone to sleep. Right? And 1998, we woke up, and then we've done some good work. But we need a lot more work to be done. And therefore, to say that future wars will be short, swift, and will not last more than 1 week or 2 weeks, the Ukraine war is smashing all those concepts. In the 1991 Gulf War, dominated by air power and 100-day swinging military ground operations, closed the war, you forget the basic lesson that here's a superpower bringing in 20-odd countries to create a coalition, complete technological mastery, and then you're dealing with a third world country. And that's not a real lesson to learn from there. The lesson to learn from there is why has the US orchestrated that war and why has it gone about demolishing Iraq? That's a strategic lesson we need to pick up. Right? 2003 is a similar example. Now, what is Ukraine war? Ukraine war is a war between US, NATO, and Russia. And the Ukrainians are the proxies who are willing to die for them, for whatever reasons it is. But there are many other examples. If initial lessons or initial observations were that the Russians would walk in and quickly smash Ukrainian, that was proved wrong. But again, don't go by different versions that are coming about it, because the Russians probably had a certain plan which was to come in multiple axes and then draw out the Ukrainian concentration on the eastern side, dissipate them, and then come to a point where they will be forced to come to an agreement and dialogue. Obviously, the West was not willing to let that happen. The Russians also got exposed phenomenally in terms of lack of training and preparation, and they've got their act together now. Now, what does this show? A weak country with a certain amount of support, and in a time frame when everybody says the air power will actually dictate everything, you're actually looking at a capability or a prosecution of a war in a certain fashion, which is air power doesn't completely dominate, one. The ground operations will not go away. And ultimately, war is all about politics. War is all about, as Clausewitz said, it's the political objectives that determine what needs to be done. If Putin's objective is to grind the adversaries in Ukraine in a long drawn-out war, his intention is to draw out the war for a longer time. If the Western objectives is to ensure that Putin gets weakened and Russia gets fragmented in a long drawn-out war, that's what they are doing. The sacrificial goats are the Ukrainians. Ukraine is a flat country. And therefore, the classic operations in terms of air superiority, strike, etc., have both positives and disadvantages. It could have been executed right in the beginning by establishing air superiority. But then since it's an absolutely flat country, the radars function well. And the radars, all are Russian origin, Soviet origin radars, they function, air defense systems have functioned well. And therefore, a weak country is able to deny air superiority to a much stronger country. And therefore, the first principle is that irrespective of your strength, your ability to use technologies that are available to you can be used intelligently to deny the attempt at creating an air superiority. But the next lesson is that the Russians quickly learned that lesson. They're not fighting for establishing air superiority. In many of the other battles, in many of our discussions, we keep fighting on that particular issue. Right? And therefore, how do they progress? The second part is, this is also a missile war. It is demonstrated very clearly that the missiles can break defense shields very well, one. Second, technology is good enough to create the kind of accuracies that are so important. And then you can selectively target the targeting systems. If Putin wanted, he could have destroyed Ukraine overnight completely. But he doesn't want to do that for very valid political reasons. And therefore, he is targeting the power centers, the selective infrastructure centers, and he is able to actually destroy them and neutralize them. Right? And these missiles are supersonic missiles, hypersonic missiles. You have no good, valid defense as yet. There is a problem there. The third one is use of drones and automated drones. And I think this is a major lesson that's coming out of it. That's how the future wars are going to be. But more importantly, the fourth one is about space. For a country, for Ukraine to be able to stand up, I think within the first week, they had actually demolished their communication center. They had got them blind virtually. The communications were completely put off. And if that had continued, the Ukrainian army would have given up. They would have surrendered. But that didn't happen. Why? Somebody mentioned about space and Elon Musk and Starlink. That's a change that's coming in a big way in space. Okay, the Starlinks provided an ability, and quickly they pushed in about 3,000, 4,000 sets, or maybe even 10,000 sets, modems to the Ukrainian government. And each soldier is able to be in communication with his command system. On the other hand, the Russians were depending on their own communication system. The GLONASS has its own weaknesses. And therefore, I think here, in terms of situational awareness, in terms of communications, the Ukrainians recovered very fast and they were on a better wicket. More importantly, the satellites that come into play. There were 120 satellites that were mobilized and brought into play to be able to give you real-time situational awareness pictures to the higher leadership and to the tactical commanders. And satellites will play a major role in any war in the future. That again tells you how much control you will be able to have. Space war is not very far off, right? And therefore the target, before he moved in on 24th, Putin actually started, or the Russians started actually cyber attacks on various satellite systems. They did go blind for a while, but I think they've been, through encryption and other processes, they were able to recover very quickly. And therefore, whether it's Moscow sinking or whether it's few other targeted attacks using drones inside of Russia, the satellite ISR plays a major role, extremely major role, right? And therefore, this is an area that we need to take cognizance of. Let's look at some data that I've actually, I've collected, which is in the rate at which these satellites are improving in technology, in terms of proliferating, in terms of numbers. I think it is unbelievable. So in 2021, I told you about the economic angle of the space industry as well. In 2022, the space economy is seen to be about $370 billion. It will touch about $642 billion by 2030. By 2040, it is expected to touch by $1 trillion. Okay, and again coming back to China. China has operationalized the Beidou 3 in 2020. The BRI strategy and Beidou 3 in combination will actually influence the economic systems of the Eurasian countries and will generate something like $1 trillion business by 2030 for the Beidou 3 related Chinese space system. It will give a run for money for the GPS. Why would anybody buy a GPS system if he has to pay twice the amount for similar receivers from the Beidou 3? On the other hand, the customer is going to be swinging and very happy because everybody will now pump in their services and he'll have multiple options to play. But the sum total of this entire strategy is that, and this is a fear for the Americans, and this is where the change in the international order is going to come, is this is one of the major regions where space capabilities play a major role in changing the economic order of the international system. That's one. Right. The second one is the number of satellites. In 2014, we were 2,487 satellites. In 2022, it is 5,400 odd satellites, out of which 3,000 satellites are already Elon Musk Starlink. Okay, how many have the Chinese got? They got close to 600 satellites, 599 to be precise. How many do we have? We have about 55, 60 satellites. What about the number of launches? Last year there were 186 launches, out of which 180 were successful. How many did the Americans launch? 72, out of which 61 plus is Elon Musk. Elon Musk had an average of one launch every 6 days. Right? And the Chinese, how many did they launch? How many launches did they have? I'm not talking about the deployments of satellites. The deployment of satellites goes to close to 3,000. These are rocket launches. The launches, the Chinese had 62, it is a record. And while the Americans, many of the launches are commercial, the Chinese is all government and the military-oriented ones. And that makes a lot of difference. How many did we have? 7. We were 3 the year before that. We did pick up some steam a few years ago. We are doing well in certain areas, but I think we need to put more resources to accelerate our space capability to make a difference. We are doing well. There are no doubts about it. But this number of launches to capture the market, to have an economic benefit to the country, and to grow your technologies is extremely important. Extremely important. The Chinese are planning over 70 launches this year, and the first few rockets have already been launched. Right? Many of the satellites that have been launched by the Chinese have a dual use and a dedicated military use capabilities. And this will play a major role in ISR in terms of monitoring, influencing certain decisions globally, and of course it poses a big threat. It's only a matter of time when the non-kinetic weaponization of space, which is already probably unofficially already existing, officially starts getting placed. And why do I say that? Because the Americans passed a law in 2015, which is Space Entrepreneurship Law, which entitles the American citizens to own space resources mined on asteroids and on the moon or on other planetary bodies. You're giving a push. Why do they give that push? The technology is maturing at such a rapid rate that it's only a matter of time that this ability to actually industrialize the cislunar space and create a dominance, which will create dominance once again back on the world, on Earth, is only a matter of maybe a decade or two away. Right? And therefore, there is already a scramble for space-based resources in terms of setting in place the mechanisms, the policies, the strategies by these countries. The US has now bypassed the United Nations system for outer space management. They are bypassing the OST as well. How are they doing that? They've created the Artemis Accords, which I think about 28 countries are now members of the Artemis Accord. The Artemis Accord also has one clause which goes directly against the Outer Space Treaty, which is a security zone and ownership zone. And when you have create a security zone on a permanent settlement that you've created on the moon, you're virtually creating a territorialization of outer space or planetary bodies. And that goes against the very essence of the Outer Space Treaty. And that, what is that? That's geopolitics in space. And you can call it as astropolitics. So this is a competition that will remain. It'll only accelerate. And therefore, in terms of ability, I mean, we all know about what air power and aerospace power have come into a zone of precision, command and control, information dominance, etc. That's all a regular story. I think we need to go far beyond that. We need to look at expeditionary capabilities. So when I now sum up with the issue of aerospace and air power capabilities in the context of national security strategy, we need to articulate where do we want to be. We want to be a great power. There's no ambiguities about that. If you want to be a great power, you should be able to influence the regions around you, which means you need an expeditionary capability. You need to be able to have adequate military capability in terms of using air power and aerospace power to deter adversaries, to be able to create a peace on your terms. That is one. That's a very important requirement. On the other hand, where is the international order? Do you want to live in this international order that has been in existence for 4 to 5 centuries? No. You want to create a multipolar world where the rule making is not privileged to one segment of the world. That's the Western world. And therefore, the Ukrainian conflict is in effect a conflict of power transition. It is a global transformation that is underway. And therefore, while formulating our national security strategy, this is what we need to understand, and we need to look at what all areas we need to keep our fingers in and work on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We are at Matishwaran. Sir has brought out 3-4 very important points, particularly the importance of aerospace and space-based technologies, as also future technologies. Secondly, he did bring out a very interesting facet that those who controls technology are the dominant powers, and they control the levers of the world, and they make the rules. So do we want to be the ones making the rules or ones asked to play by those rules? He's also brought out the need to have a national security strategy, a documented one, if I'm not wrong, sir. That's an interesting point because there are views and counter views on that. So I would invite the audience to ask questions. And lastly, what he's brought out is that where do we see ourselves? Where does India see itself in the global order? So looking at these points, as also the other points covered by the previous 2 speakers, I would request you to ask the questions. Please be very brief. You can ask more questions, but don't have any preambles. And the house is now open, so with your permission.
Please. All yours.
Yes, the gentleman there. So, of course, always time, sir.
My question is, we have it well, and there is a permanent presence.
Next question, please.
So my question is to Vasan sir. Sir, by next coming decades, can we see that most of the geopolitical issues will be in the Arctic region?
Okay, no.
I think we are loud enough.
Basically, you're talking about the Arctic region and whether there's scope for or possibilities of that becoming a geopolitical area. The answer is yes, because the oceans are melting there, and there's already the traffic has started, and the Nordic states and Russia were the primary claimants to that area now are being challenged by China indirectly in terms of using this as a common heritage of maritime. There will be claims, there will be counterclaims, BRI, and ensure that all the Nordic states and whoever else that will be supported. There will be investments, and through the BRI, they'll try to have some kind of a space there.
So they're investing in this big.
Yeah.
See, India does have an Arctic policy. India came with the Arctic policy last year, and the largest land presence is of Russia there in the Arctic. Also, there is a move to create the Northern Passage to reduce the transit time of shipping, but that depends on how Russia reacts with the other Arctic Council countries. There's Arctic Council, largely led by the Americans. They are very keen on having this Northern Passage. And so the Chinese also trying the Northern Passage out, but it all depends on Russia. And Russia is the largest stakeholder there. And India's initial Arctic policy last year has come out.
But the Arctic is also going to be a powder keg in the future because the world globe is warming up, and as the ices melt in the Arctic, there is a study that's been done in Russia where Russia's economic potential will just shoot up phenomenally through that axis, and therefore Russia is not going to accept anybody, including China, trying to take advantage of the Arctic. That's going to be a area of zone of conflict.
Actually, India has been invited to invest in Eastern around Vladivostok.
Yes. Yep. Next question. So, so there's a student, you allow him. Give the microphone. Okay, you can speak. No problems.
Can hear you.
You forward it.
So, India is sandwiched between two nuclear capable powers. One is China, which is a superpower, and the other one is Pakistan, which is apparently a failing state. And this failing state is dependent on China as well. So, how do you think that this situation should inform our discussions on national security strategy?
It's very simple in my assessment. No, it's only because of these threats that were emerging from our neighborhood that we went nuclear. Whether it's a Pokhran or thereafter declaring ourselves as a nuclear weapon state. And therefore, we are quite clear as to what the thresholds are, and that's why we also created a strategic forces command, which knows what to do, when to do, how to do it. So I don't think either China or Pakistan are going to cross the nuclear threshold. We, of course, both China and us have the NFU, the no first use policy. Pakistan does not say they will adopt the NFU. So if and when that happens, then we are prepared. So I don't think it's a big issue as of now, because even during Kargil, there are reports to say that we almost crossed the nuclear threshold. It didn't happen because there's always superpower intervention that will happen directly or indirectly. Yes. So, not directly into American control, but they negotiated at that time. It's quite clear that they negotiated with both India and Pakistan. And another incident which is quoted recently is about post-Balakot. Post-Balakot, again, apparently there was this threat of Pakistan going nuclear, etc., where both the leaders were taken into confidence. So these international mechanisms will perhaps always come into play, unless there are some mad people on the nuclear trigger.
Next question, please. So, Professor Suryanarayan,
Two comments in the form of questions. Brief. There are so many agencies at work as far as safeguarding our national security is concerned. Take the case of what happened in Bombay, the Pakistani terrorist attacks. I was told by R. Swaminathan, one of our founding fathers, who said that there is, of course, the Marine Police, there is the Coast Guard, there is the Navy, there is the Customs, which has also got some armed support and all. There was also the Naval Aviation. Each one of them was on duty on different days. in an important meeting in Delhi in which Admiral Arun Prakash, the former Chief of Naval Staff, was present. I told him I understand different agencies are at work and they were on duty on each days. What went wrong? Do you know what was Admiral Arun Prakash's answer was? The Coast Guard is not cooperating with us. Blaming one another for what resulted in a national calamity is very easy. But what is required is the coordination among various agencies to promote and safeguard our national security. The IPKF misadventure in Sri Lanka, which cost nearly 2,000 lives of our innocent soldiers from all parts of India, is an illustration of different agencies working at cross purposes. Center and state, Q branch, IB, RAW, you all know what happened. The explosives which the LTT used against the IPKF went from India. And the LTT guerrillas who were wounded by the IPKF were brought to India for medical treatment in Trichy. So this was brought to the notice of successive government. This was also brought to notice of the governor when there was central president's role in the state. So we had to learn this. And I would request each one of you to briefly comment how it can be accomplished. Are we in a better position today than what we were in when the Bombay blast took place? The third one is a very, according to me, very important comment. It's not Indian Ocean, it is South Indian Ocean. The South Indian states, maritime states, which are involved in all this. So I think there should be a greater opinion making, greater inputs from southern Indian states to the making of India's naval strategy.
Just wanted to put things in the correct perspective as far as the Mumbai terror attack is concerned, notwithstanding what our statements have been made. It's very clear, established both by the Krishna Commission and as well as other thing, that this vessel which was hijacked was MV Kuber, which was flying an Indian flag. There are lakhs of Indian fishermen who are out there flying Indian flag. How do you differentiate one from the other? And in this particular, it was commandeered. And MV Kuber, which was there, was commandeered by the terrorists, numbering 10. And till they reached the Bombay shores, they ensured that the captain was alive, the rest were killed, and he was killed after they reached the Bombay shores. As far as the integration between the Navy, Coast Guard, Customs and different agencies which are operating there, I think everything was resolved. Flag Officer Tamil Nadu area will watch for it to say that now there is an operational control of the maritime forces there. There is a joint patrol which takes place under coordination of the agencies which are concerned. And also the recent appointment of the IMSC, the Indian Maritime Security Coordinator, is something which is going to try and address some of these. I'm not saying everything is resolved just because you appointed Vice Admiral Ashok Kumar as the IMSC. I'm saying that they are going to look at how these agencies operate in the common domain and what kind of answers can be provided to see that they enhance their levels. The MDA has come in a big way. It has helped us, but that takes care of the big vessels. The smaller vessels, the fishing vessels, particularly above 20 meters, do not operate the AIS, though they are required to by law. There is automated identification system. Vessels less than 20 meters engaged in fishing will not operate this, though the Coast Guard has been insisting on this, that they must have this so that we can track them. They don't want to be tracked when they poach in Sri Lankan waters, which is why they switch off. So these are harsh realities which you must understand. So I would not go to the extent of blaming the agencies there. There are mechanisms which are there. We can improve on them, definitely. I agree with your recommendation that they must talk to each other more. There are joint operations room which he is manning almost on a daily basis, 24/7, and they do the needful. The second thing on IPKF, the numbers, if I may correct, there were 1,300 deaths, close to 1,300, not 2,000. And that, was a state and center difference. So it's beyond our purview to discuss how the state and the center did not agree with one another. So I'm not sure what answers there are when BJP has one language, the DMK here has one language. The Congress at that time had one language with the UPA, and the DMK here had another language for the terrorists. So that's something which you have to live with in a democracy. Thank you. Would you like to add something?
No, I'll just add.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, okay. Just to, I think Commodore Vasan has put it across perfectly well. I was in Bombay when the attack happened. So I was Air Officer commanding Maritime Air Operations. There were gaps, but I think, like you said, post the event, a lot of corrections have been brought in, and I think it's well under control. That's one part. But there are many lessons to have been learned. And that points to the point that I made during my talk, is that the national security strategy must have a holistic approach in integrating multiple agencies. Okay, and they all should be connected and made accountable. I don't know if you all had seen, immediately after the event, there were funds that were allotted for modernization of the Bombay police, were used for buying swanky vehicles for the officers rather than invest in weapons and sensors to enable their performance better. So I think that kind of an accountability internally would have been addressed, I'm sure. But more importantly, there is a geostrategic element that I want to bring it out, is that immediately after the attack, Colin Powell was the Secretary of State in the US, and he makes a statement: India is well within its rights to respond as it deems fit. In 2001 parliamentary attack, Condoleezza Rice repeats pretty much similar statement. 48 hours later, the American administration turns around and says, please don't act rashly, diffuse the situation, talk to each other. So, in an international system, when you don't make the rules, you get a window of 48 hours to react. We could have reacted, and air power is the only one that could have been used to react effectively. But there are many other complexities and components that have to fall in place and be ready to react when a window like this comes up for you. And why didn't we react is a question for strategists to continue to research.
One point on intelligence coordination. Can I have a mic? Intelligence coordination is much better now. It is a networked on all India basis. But one thing about int agencies, they will never share 100% of their information, because they are in various stages of cultivating the agent, or it is for some other purpose. So you will always have, they say, the intelligence failure, because it is not a craft, where you have 100% control. That is why it is now integrated with other means. That is, you are monitoring even social media, your mobile phones are monitored, your electronic traffic is monitored, and the states are integrated. State police are trained now. They are also on the circuit. But it depends very much on what the states want to see also. Many times they don't want to see what is coming on the ticker, because it involves some politician or somebody. So in a democracy, you will have this deficiency. UK, you can see the counter-terrorism report, the latest one that has come in UK. It lays bare what are the deficiencies, when everybody can see the apparent terrorist operation. So you will have deficiencies, but we should reduce it. So that is why I am saying there should be accountability of intelligence agencies. There should be oversight committees. Otherwise, there will be, because they are not accountable to the public. So they will be misused. So there should be some watchdog. Thank you. But the police commission report itself is not fully implemented. There had been 13 police commissions to improve the police.
Thank you, sirs. We've had a long, interesting discussions on the national security strategy, need for it, challenges and priorities. The fundamental question still remains, does India have one or not? Personally, to my view, of course, we have it. That's why we are doing what we are doing. It may not be documented in a particular format or a particular way, as we have been learning in respective colleges and areas. but the fact that we are conducting our policies, whether it's external defense, internal security policies, means we have something cogent. A lot of discussions happen on the technology, the need for technology and induction of technology. Certainly, technology is important and we must stay abreast. But one thing hasn't changed in the art of warfare. While technology has changed the way we fight wars, it hasn't changed the way we win wars. It still requires the young company commander with his 120 men to take over the enemy bunker, and that's been amply demonstrated despite America's overwhelming power. They lost in Vietnam, they lost in Afghanistan. So we must keep the truism in mind. And why it happens is because the countries that they were fighting were very clear they want to win. It's too early to make any judgment on the Ukraine-Russia conflict because still early stages. So I will not venture for no other reason because there's no authentic source of information to actually dispassionately study what happened. All our information sources are from the Western sources because we read the English language, that's all. It's as simple as that. So I would not. But I would certainly, a very important point Air Marshal Mathisen brought out is the geography. Why is Russia so absolutely defending its actions? Because Ukraine, like Sir brought out, is flat territory, classic territory for air battles and for tank battles. And Russia has given Russia's geography across 11 time zones, and bulk of its population west of the Urals, right across the European steppes, north of France, right of Russia is classic flat territory. So the biggest security nightmare for Russia is defending that border, 4,000 long kilometer, north-south border. And the bottleneck is Ukraine, the shortest land border they can defend. It's as simple as keep the enemy as far away as possible. And the second aspect, of course, is the access to warm water ports. Because if you take out Ukraine out of the equation, there's no Black Sea. So having said that, it is ultimately what a country wants and how far they will go to defend what they want, which comes back to the basic national requirement of strategy, what Chanakya said, core national interests. And that's what national security strategy is all about. Professor Suryanarayan brought a very important point of coordination. Yes, and that's again, I go back to Arthashastra, the Saptanga theory, all arms of the state, 7 arms of the state have to act in tandem. The kings, the ministers, the economy. What's today in IR is called the dime paradigm was articulated by Chanakya way back whenever he wrote that. Saptanga theory in coordination with these 4 upayas, Samadam, Ved, Dand. That effectively will help us come out with our own national aims, policies, strategies. Without taking much time and staying between you and the lunch, thank you very much for your participation. I thank Commodore Vasan sir for allowing me this opportunity to be here amongst such eminent personalities and listen to each one of you. Ultimately, to me, India's national security has been articulated in 2 simple words that I finished my talk with. Jai Hind.
Admiral, for having moderated the session so efficiently, and we've had a very interesting yet long session. I'm sure all of us are waiting for lunch. However, before we conclude, I'd just like to ask Commodore Vasan to felicitate the Rear Admiral with a set of books.
I'm sure it's not from Chanakya. It's all from our
I also request Commodore Vasan to felicitate Air Marshal Mathisen.
I have stopped reading printed books. I read only online.
Thank you, sirs. I'm tempted to quote Shakespeare. There is a tide in the affairs of men, taken at the flood leads on to fortune, omitted, and all the voyage of their lives will be in the shallows and miseries. On such a full sea we are now afloat. Let us take the current while it serves us, or lose our ventures. With that quote, let me end the panel discussion, and I now invite Shebin, our research intern, to give away the vote of thanks.
Come, let me get out.
Good afternoon, all of you. I'm Shebin, research intern at C3S. I know I'm blocking your path to lunch, but without further ado, I shall proceed to fulfill my responsibilities. I thank C3S for giving this opportunity to propose a vote of thanks. On behalf of the entire team of Chennai Center for China Studies and the National Maritime Foundation Tamil Nadu chapter, I take immense pleasure in extending our heartfelt gratitude to all of you. Your presence and support made this event a truly memorable one, and it is through your contribution that we are able to pay tribute to our founding members and their legacy. First and foremost, I have the pleasure expressing my sincere gratitude to our guest speaker, Ambassador T.S Tirumurti IFS retired, former Ambassador, Permanent Representative of India to the United Nations, for his outstanding presentation on combating global terrorism, trends and challenges. I would also like to extend our gratitude to Rear Admiral S. Raman, VSM Flag Officer commanding Tamil Nadu and Puducherry Naval Area. His guidance and leadership have provided stimulating environment for the panelists to discuss the various challenges and priorities facing India's security and strategy. I thank Air Marshal M. Matheswaran, AVSM VM retired, Founder President, the Peninsula Foundation, for delivering a compelling and insightful presentation on the topic of national security strategy, aerospace and air perspective. And also, Shri B.S. Raghavan, IS retired, Chief Patron, C3S, for remembering our founders of C3S in today's event. Professor Suryanarayan, Founding Director of the Center for South and Southeast Asian Studies at University of Madras, for his efforts to keep memory of late Shri B. Raman alive. Colonel R. Hariharan, VSM retired, Strategic Analyst of the Intelligence Corps. His efforts to commemorate the memory of late Shri Swaminathan is deeply appreciated. Shri L.V. Krishnan, former Director of the Safety Research Group at the Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research in Kalpakkam, for his efforts to preserving the legacy of late Shri D.S. Rajan. I would also like to extend my sincere gratitude to our Director General, Commodore R.S. Vasan, Indian Navy retired, for entrusting and guiding us with such a huge responsibility and delivering a welcome address for this event. And at last but not the least, a big thank you to all veterans of the armed forces, serving officers, foreign delegates, friends from the media, China watchers, and all students from the various colleges. Also thank you, Ashwin, for your diligent handling of this event. Thank you all once again. Jai Hind.
Lunch is available at the Rhythm Hall, which is down the corridor towards the left. I invite all of you to please join us for lunch. Thank you.